the stream, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let me get this sent out. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it looks like we're live now. So I'm just going to do a real quick. I'll just give you actually the chance there, Ryan. So I'll just lay it down. So me and Ryan here have had a couple interactions in a comment section on the Liberty Experts podcast by David and Tim. And actually, it was a great program. So if you want to check that out, I would suggest that you do. And that'll be linked in the description of this stream as well. And basically, it was the conversation was regarding anarchy versus government. And there were some great points presented from both sides. David is an objectivist. Tim's a libertarian, although he's genuinely, he would also identify as an ANCAP, basically not a believer in government. A philosophical libertarian is what I describe as a person that just doesn't believe in the mystical construct. But anyways, it was a great conversation. Like I say, they made lots of good points, but I think some of the nuance, some things were left out. And rather than doing it in text form, I always find that and trying to communicate with people in text form, it becomes really difficult. It takes a long time. Usually it's not as fluid. And it's a little bit more difficult for anyone that's on looking to see, because that might be moved off into the future and then you'll never see. Whereas if you do it in video form, like what we're doing in a stream form, people always can go back and watch it and see, you know, what's being said, the nuances, you know, the expressions and everything that's involved. So I enjoy having these conversations with people. And Ryan was gracious enough to join me today because obviously we have some disagreements ourselves, but we're going to keep this conversation, like I always try to do, as cordial as human possible. Because really at the end of the day, it's not really a competition to figure out who's the smartest or who's the best of the best. It's really, we're talking about discussing ideas and things that actually are profoundly affecting all of our lives. So I think this is going to be a great conversation. As long as we both come at it with good faith arguments and present our ideas, I think this will be a great conversation. But if you want to add anything, just while I'm sharing these to my other social media pages, Ryan, introduce yourself to the people that are in the stream now, and then we'll get to work on talking about what we want to discuss today.
Yeah. Well, I primarily make content at Existence University, a YouTube channel, the channel I was communicating with you through.
Yep.
And
I'll make sure to share that in the description of the stream as well. So
all right, that sounds good.
Yeah.
But primarily what I work on there is more like epistemology and the other parts of the philosophy. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to politics, it's kind of the last thing that I think about.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when talking in a discussion between objectivists and libertarians and ANCAPs and anarchists and so on and so on, it's the libertarians, ANCAPs always just start philosophy at politics. And so I always want to come in and just add that there's a ton of foundation underneath this.
Yes, hugely. Yes, for sure. I definitely agree with you on that one, because politics is actually the least interesting part of these things that I find, to be honest with you. But anyway, so like I say, so basically if you want, just to throw out there kind of what is your initial thoughts in regards to the premise that was like how they were discussed, like do you believe in government or I guess the best way to say is, and I'll just allow you to go with it yourself, is, you know, what is your underlying principles and anything that you structured your mind and your thought process to lend you to fall onto one side of that debate or the other. And I'm not even sure at this particular time what side of the debate you do fall on, but maybe if you want to clarify that for us now.
It would be the protection of the mind, really. It's protection of reason and rationality.
Right, yeah.
That's definitely what it fundamentally comes down to.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing, because I would assume you agree too, and especially with a lot of objectivists. This is actually a little bit of a problem I have with objectivists, because most of the time, and these are people 95% of the time I respect tremendously, and you know the methodology that they use, and using objective logic and the real world rather than mystical constructs, this almost like the scientific method as the basis for their thinking in terms of, like how we deal with each other on the social or economic realm. What I always find out when we get to this point is, even myself, when I started on this whole journey in terms of learning all this stuff, what's a libertarian, what's an objectivist, what's a classical liberal, what's a conservative, what's the very premise? What does liberty even mean? What does that mean for a human being? Now, I've been on a long journey more than a decade in the making now, trying to understand these things. And that old saying, I remember someone that said it back, it was way back in the very early days when I was trying to go down and learning all these things, is and it was the difference between minarchists and which are limited government libertarians, and then ANCAPs or philosophical libertarians that just don't believe in government. And what I found is when they use that expression is it's usually about 6 months before you go from a limited government minarchist to like an ANCAP or an anarchist that does not believe in government. And what I realized after the fact, and now that I'm into the position and the mindset I am today, is, well, the reason why they were saying that is because if you're going to use the logic or the underlying basis or premises or principles that you hold dear, if you follow through with them logically, you can't help but end up with, there's no such thing as a legitimate government. Now, a lot of people get shocked. They learn these things, but once again, that's, to me, is I'm putting politics aside. And just like as if I was wanting to send a spaceship into space, I have to use math. I have to use gravity. I have to use all these objective measures and standards that we use to make the determination if I want to, like I say, send a ship up to Mars. Like, Elon Musk, right? He's not going to be able to rely on people's mystical beliefs or their subjective opinions, right? He's going to rely on the underlying fundamentals and the principles of like gravity, of mathematics, and the solar system and how everything works. And it'll work because you'll be able to send these things up into space and it'll function as you would expect because you're using those underlying premises and principles for your decision making. And that's the big thing for me, which is why I just, and it's not that I get to choose it. It's not like I've chosen to make this as an opinion. It's just I follow the logic and the consistency of the very underlying principles and premises. And like I say, if you test the hypothesis out for yourself, you find out pretty quick that there's just no such thing as having legitimate rulers.
I based on, you're talking about, like, if you go back to your NASA stuff, like, how did we get to the moon? This is the same way we have to come to morality. That philosophy is science. It's not. A lot of people like to pretend that philosophy, because it was taken over a long time ago by mystics, people like to pretend that it's mystical. But philosophy is a science, and we can come to objective law. And if we come to an objective law, then there's no room for competition, is what it comes down to.
Competition in terms of what you mean? I'm not quite following.
Well, if you establish an objective government,
right,
the laws are objective, which means the laws cannot change, which means there's no point in having competing methods of implementing these so-called services.
Right.
And if there's because the proper government wouldn't be able to charge you for upholding your rights, and they would all follow the same rules. They'd follow the same punishments, the same ways of holding people in their cells. So ultimately, what would the competition even come down to? So in that sense, because objective law comes down to the same thing as physical laws, there's only one answer. And if there's only one answer, then you can't even compete over it.
Right. I'm just trying to follow your train of thought here. So I think I kind of get what you're saying with the competing, but you mean that people have different competing ideas, preferences, or ideologies. Is that what you're trying to allude to, or political stance? Because like I say, we were kind of going to step back away from that, right? We're talking, but when you're saying objective law, well, when you're saying what kind of law are you talking about? Like the law of gravity is obviously objective because we can test that on all areas of this planet, no matter who you are, no matter what your politics. But what do you mean when you're talking about in terms of government? Because government
is physical law.
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean the exact same thing as physical law.
Right. Well, but we're dealing with government, like, so anarchy versus government, and government is a construct, right? It's literally a mystical construct that we humans.
And that's where we fundamentally disagree.
Okay. How do we disagree in that? Then now we're getting to the point.
How do you define a construct? And doesn't that, in a sense, sound a little Marxist to you?
No. What I'm saying is government. So here's what I always do. And this is a great way to do it, because rather than me try to, jam something in your head, I like to, first of all, you just use, like I say, you seem like a person, you want to use logic and objective reasoning to make the determination for your opinion based on any of these things that we're going to discuss. So in terms of government, it's a really simple concept. And I actually have kind of narrowed it down to help people such as yourself to kind of break through, because like I say, we've all been programmed to believe in certain things, in certain methodologies, certain ways, to believe in things that are actually impossible in the objective world. So my big thing is like in terms of government. So we all know that government is based on, you know, the pretense of being the ultimate arbiter of authority in any particular geographical area. That's what the government is. They suggest to have the claim to be the legitimate rulers or to set the rules in society, right? You agree with that, correct? I just want to make sure.
Well, I can't agree with that because it started with something that I had an issue with, and then it just kept going on, which was that I don't understand what you mean with impossible. That's something. What can be impossible in that objective sense?
Okay. Well, I'll use the 4 questions to clarify that, actually, because the 4 questions do the best job rather than getting really, and then we can get into the nuance of it afterwards. But so the big thing is, do I, I'm just a mere mortal human being like you, just like everyone. I bleed when you cut me, and I made of skin and bones and all that stuff. Would you suggest, do I have any legitimate authority to take any portion of anyone's income against their will without their express implied permission? I would assume that you would agree that no, I don't, correct?
I would agree, but I would also state that we probably came to that by different conclusions.
Oh yeah, I don't care how you get to it. I'm like ultimately, like I say, there's just like when I was in school, there was lots of ways that people could come to the determination is, you know, a mathematical equation. Some people might use a different methodology, but as long as you're figuring out, like, and you're using the underlying fundamentals of math, right? You're not coming up with your own construct of math. Then as long as you get to the same conclusion, I would suggest that you've done at least something right if you've achieved the same. Now, you could have fluked out, but we'll test that hypothesis out after we get first. But so you would at least agree that as a human being, and we all 7+ billion of us on this planet, we're all human beings. None of us are special in any way in terms of having any magical powers, right? We're basically all comprised of just being mere mortal human beings. So to me, it's what I'm suggesting is, if I don't have any legitimate authority, and we can all universalize that to be objectively true, because we've all agreed in any society that I would suggest, when Western societies, that theft is something that's considered unethical or immoral, and you can't universalize theft. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Stefan Molyneux, but he's talked about this quite extensively. You can't universalize things such as that, because if we all wanted people to steal from us, or we all wanted to steal from each other, then you actually have negated the very term theft, because the underlying description or definition of theft is to take something or someone's money or their property or something away from that person without their permission. So once again, we're just going to use the universalized reality that theft is considered moral and unethical. And if I don't have any legitimate authority to take any portion of anyone's income from them without their express or implied consent, then the next thing would be, and I like to use this one too, because there's the economics of it, but there's also the social part of it. So I don't have any legitimate authority to go over and tell my neighbor that he has to live his life as I deem or based on my edict. So I say, well, you have to live, you know, in such a manner and do this, that. My neighbor would look at me like I have 2 heads, and he'd say, no, you're freaking nuts, man. You got to go see it. You know what I mean? Because I don't have any legitimate authority to tell that person how to live their life. And I would assume you would agree with that as well, correct?
That's only based on the morality of the system that you're currently in.
No, I'm not. I'm just talking about like, morality in general.
But I'm saying, where do you get this from?
Where do I get from? What, the theft
is
wrong?
We both agree that killing is wrong, but we agree for different reasons, say. So it's just because we agree doesn't make the end statement necessarily true. We could both agree that socialism is the best, but that doesn't mean that we've proven anything.
No, but see, this is what I mean. That's why I don't know how you've come to determine
that you can't take from your neighbor.
What's that? Sorry?
Where do you get the idea that you can't take from your neighbor?
Oh, I could. I'm saying we're talking in terms of either put it this way. I probably should have asked this first. Do you believe there's such thing as universal morals or ethics?
When you say universal, I'm going to have to say no, because I think, especially because I disagree with Stefan Molyneux, and that his universally preferable behaviors is built on begging the question. He starts, if universally preferable behaviors is true, then this, therefore it's true. So I don't agree with his statements there, but in the sense that reality is objective, human beings are, in that sense, objects in the universe.
Yeah.
Therefore, we have to set objective.
Or at least we're agreeing to function in that realm, right?
Yeah.
We're agreeing. See, that's the thing. If I wanted to kind of do what you're doing there, I could play this. Actually, we're just, brains in a bucket construct, right? But that's what I mean. It's like, if we but if we're just going to move the goalpost to suit your narrative, I'm willing to see. This is the thing. I'm willing to stick to all of the defined meanings that already exist in terms of what the world represents, what math is, what and what gravity means, what ethics is, and what morality. I'm willing to stick with those defined meanings without stepping outside of those goalposts or moving them anywhere just to suit my narrative. So I'm
not really moving it. That's where I established my base. My base is that I start with reality, and I want to protect reason, and reason's a part of reality.
Right. But if you're disagreeing that there's no such thing as objective morality, so what are you suggesting, that morality is just subjective?
No, I'm saying it is objective.
Pardon me?
But I'm saying it is objective.
Oh,
okay. There's one set of rules.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what universality is, right? It's like, if theft is wrong, then I can't make an exception for someone else, because once again, if it's going to be a principle or something that we're going to consider as a rule to engage with each other socially or economically, there can't be a principle that you can somehow give other people an escape clause, because then it removes it's no longer a principle, right?
Yeah, I guess.
So that's all I'm getting to. And once again, I'm not trying to catch up or anything. That's all I'm trying to get to right now is, if we're going to discuss these things in terms of ideas and the philosophy and the ethics, is we have to stick with standards that we're both going to have to accept and own up to, that we don't get to reinterpret, that we don't get to make up ourselves. So to me, theft is wrong, murder is wrong, rape is wrong, and that has to be universal. And if that is true, and if you agree with that, then I'm kind of speeding up the 4-question quest that I usually put forward towards people. But it's, if I don't have the authority to take from my neighbor or to control his life, how do I delegate that authority onto some other human being? If I don't have, I can't give someone something that I don't possess myself. Is the big problem, is the big issue that I find a lot of objectivists or people that disagree with anarchists or philosophical libertarians, and that's the issue that I'm trying to figure out today between our conversation here.
Well, I think that just comes from thinking, what I think a government should be.
Okay, but it's not a matter of what you think a government should be. Once again, we have to go by the defined meaning, right? Otherwise, if you just get to define what government means, once again, I'm going by exactly what the definition, if you want to use Merriam-Webster, Oxford, the New Dictionary, online whatever one you want, they all basically say the same thing. There's a little different nuances, but they all suggest that governments are these entities that have this authority to do things that no other human being has the authority to do, right?
But that's where I would suggest that the difference between objectivism and libertarianism is philosophy. Like, that libertarianism is about concrete thinking. Literally just read it out of the dictionary and don't think about it after that. But
no, not necessarily.
I definitely think what is proper way of living, you need to think about abstractly, what should a government be? Not just what governments have been. Because of course, none of us, we both agree that neither of us want one of the governments from the past. We don't want feudalism. We don't want communism. We don't really want what we've got right now. Mm-hmm. So but just because we don't want what happened in the past doesn't mean that, I don't know how you want to move away from the past, but then use the past as your definition of what we should continue, of what we should reject, rather than how could we form a better one, is a question I think objectivists asks that libertarians don't. Can we form a better government?
Well, this is the part that I think that I would ask as just, even if I wasn't a libertarian, is why are you, or I won't ask the other of these objectivists because I'm not speaking with them, but why are you committed to the term government being something, being reinvented to be something that it has never been in the past. I'm just curious, why wouldn't you just call it whatever you want to suggest as a new way, a new paradigm for us to socially or interact economically? Why are you committed to calling the government? Why can't it just be human beings doing their thing? We could come up with all kinds of terms.
Ultimately, it comes down to concept formation and unit form. Like unit, government is just a unit. It's just a word.
No, well, that's what I'm. No, but okay. Forget about my definition, or well, I just go by the dictionary definition. Then I guess the next logical thing for me to do is ask you, what is your definition for government? Then
a proper government is one that only uses retaliatory force against those who initiate it.
Okay,
but
and
my
how
form of
how do you form a government, though?
Pardon?
But what? First of all, a government. But they're people, right? You government, like, so is government to you like just are the entities that float in the air, or is government usually comprised of actual human beings like you or I?
Well, government obviously is made of people.
Okay.
What would be the point of a government without people, right?
Exactly. And you just suggested that a government is something that only uses force as a means
retaliatory force.
Retaliatory force. Yeah, rather than offensive retaliatory force. And I would suggest, but that's going to be, so you're going to give that thing, government, these people, this thing that they're only going to use retaliatory force. I would suggest, why don't you say that all 7+ billion people on the planet are their own governments, and they should stick to and abide by the exact same rules?
Because how are you
going
to, can you let me finish? How are you going to make sure that every single one of those 7 billion people is following an objective law?
Exactly. I would ask you the same question. How are you going to make sure that 1 or 10 or 50 people are doing it?
You just do it with one state.
No, but how are you going to, once you've given these people the I don't know, I guess the authority of calling themselves government, right? And you're saying that, because that's literally what the Constitution did, right? That's kind of the whole point of the U.S. Constitution, was to say, this is your limited role. You must be a night watchman state. You have to stick and confine yourself within the boundaries of the Constitution. It was well written out. Actually, one of the best written documents, on the planet in terms of delegating what should be government responsibilities. But as we're seeing, even with that greatest example that's ever been produced in history, it hasn't binded government to anything that you would expect or hope for, based on the fact that someone wrote something down on parchment or paper. So I'm just wondering if it's never ever happened in any time in all of history where you can just write something down, give people, delegate them this authority and say, but you're only allowed to use it for X, right? And then you trust them that's all they'll ever do with it. Like that seems to be a really, really strange thing. I would rather trust to give a whole bunch of other people, right, or everybody, that kind of authority to not delegate it to a third person, but to be personally responsible and proactive in using their means in only voluntary measures and never causing harm to someone, unless, like you were suggesting, it's in retaliatory or for defensive purpose, rather than placing that in the hands of a small group of people and I don't know what, having faith that they're just going to abide by it because there's some exceptional human beings. That the rest of us, I guess, we're just too inept to follow those procedures or those rules of social or economic engagement. Which the funny part is I would imagine I'm not in government. I would expect you're not in government, and actually I follow through all of my life. I basically stick to and constrain myself to those rules, so I don't go out and use preemptive force. But government does it every day. The people that are politicians do it every day. So that's the part that I always find strange. It's that, and I'm totally with you. I'm with you with all like what you want. But I think it's a false belief to suggest that you're going to give that kind of power or authorities to some people in society, and that they're just going to be so holier than thou or more benevolent than the rest of us in society, that they're the ones with that power, like you say. So, because when you were saying, that's the other thing, actually, I should have helped got you to define, is you say they can only use force for defensive purpose, but you're saying they can use force, which means they should have access to tools, right? Such as weapons and guns, right? So it's like handing your guns off to, someone that you don't know, you've never, you don't know exactly who they are in 100% of the way, and saying, I'm just going to trust. I just would do that for any human being, to be honest with you. I just don't, I expect most people are pretty decent, but I just don't place my faith and trust in people and say, I'm just going to delegate that responsibility for taking care of me or protecting me from bad things that happen in society, and hope that they won't be the ones that are actually in turn are the ones that become the ones that I really need to be concerned about and have the biggest threat towards me.
Well, do you think I want to take the guns away?
No. I'm not suggesting that. But I'm just,
by the sounds of it, you're saying that I want like only the police, like the only reason I think the government can have retaliatory force is because every single citizen can have retaliatory force. The whole point is just delegating it to a select few so that everyone in the country can go, hey, this guy stepped out of line and we're in control of the police. And it's the citizens that decide that, but there's no point of competition, as we've already discussed, if there's only one set of rules and one way of implementing them. So the whole point, like, I don't understand how you could say from one point of view that the government will probably, no doubt, overstep its boundaries, but that if you delegate it to everyone, that everyone else isn't, like, that no one is going to ever overstep their bounds. That, like,
I never suggested that. I never suggest that. But the difference is,
like, isn't that just pure anarchy then? Rather than, like,
of course,
capitalism?
Yes, no rulers. I don't believe in having rulers or masters. Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. But this is the thing. It's not that I don't expect that just because if I say to my neighbors, hey, you're not allowed to steal from my backyard, I don't suggest that they never will, because like I say, people are susceptible and fallible. So they're susceptible to doing wrong things or being evil at particular times, or having criminal intent. It's not that. It's just that with a thief, if a neighbor's coming over, whether it's me or the rest of my neighbors, if we don't believe that he has any legitimate authority to steal from me, then first of all, I already know, like, if someone's trying to take something against my will, I already know, okay, this is a person that has criminal intent. They're trying to take something against my will. And I would be proactive to protect and defend myself against that. And if I wanted to solicit my neighbors to help me out, maybe the person, was, outgun me or whatever, was just too much or too overwhelming for me, maybe I could solicit some of my neighbors to help me out to defend me or my property against this person. So there's still always going to be the potential for bad people to do bad things in society. The difference is, once you've created this thing called government, then entire populations of people no longer want to defend themselves against them, because you've convinced them that actually it's not theft no more. It's you're supposed to allow them to take your money and don't question them. That's the thing. At least with the neighbor, I know, and everyone else would know that was wrong. And that's something that would be universal, because most people, or all people that I've ever met, understand that theft is wrong. Some might disagree with that or not, but they definitely understand, or they might do it regardless, but they still understand that theft is wrong. Whereas if we give this pretense of some people in society that actually we don't call it theft no more, we just call it taxation, or we don't call it that you're trying to control your neighbors, we just call it legislation, then all we've done now is taken it, the small minor threats from the petty thief or even the criminal gangs, and now we've made it so that now we actually subject ourselves to people doing things wrong, and we no longer even have the pretense or willingness to defend ourselves, because we believe that theft is appropriate, or even some people believe that it's benevolent.
Well, yeah. It's true that some people do think it's benevolent, but that's it. Again, that it comes down to morality. So depending on what kind of moral system you have, will depend on whether or not people even consider violence, right? So it's like in certain situations, if you're going to allow any citizen to decide how to delegate objective law, you're going to get some people that are going to like rise up and want to do Sharia law as their objective law. But all of this is so, say, muddied by the fact that we're talking 21st century global politics all at once. And I think it would be more fruitful if we try to simplify this to going back to like a Wild West like town of like 100 people. And then it's like, now let's try to figure out why we need a government, or if we need a government.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I'll play along with that scenario if you want to try that. That would be a good one. Go for it. If you want to start it.
My argument being then, like, we're a town of 100 people. We all have basic individual jobs that we're doing for our values. And this is one of the key points of objectivism. Isn't just that you live your life like a robot having to do things. You want to do things. There are values in your life.
For sure.
And if you say, using I'm not sure who it was, Mies or the broken window fallacy, one of the people in town's a baker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you break his window, he can't buy a new oven because he's going to want to. So, but he doesn't want to also waste that money on security of his place.
Yeah.
So he just wants to, if someone breaks his stuff, someone will objectively hold the criminal to his charges. Right. But he doesn't want to have to be the one that has to go out and do the hunting or go out and find someone who will bounty hunt for him.
Yeah.
He wants to just be able to turn to the one guy in town that everyone has agreed, the sheriff, to uphold the objective law. And then I don't see a point in a sense of adding a second sheriff, because the only point for the sheriff in that town is basically to put them behind the bars until they have a fair trial.
Right.
Kind of thing, right? And it's like, so you would only have a competition in physical restraint. And what would a competition in physical restraint mean? Like, some people are like, well, I don't think you're holding him in, that prison's too nice for that guy. So I want to take him to the competition who's got, the rat infested jail. Like, what kind of competition would you actually be looking for? It's like, I want this guy arrested and held behind bars. And then you start shopping for like what type of bars or what kind of environment they're living in. So it's like, what would the point be? Just have one sheriff protecting the town for one set of rules and one set of implementations.
Right. So I get what you're saying, but I've already found a couple of things that I think I'm going to have to take issue with in terms of your example. First of all, if you had a town of 100 people, you'd be pretty hard pressed to find all 100 people that would agree on that one person to be the sheriff, let's say, because there's going to be some people that might know that sheriff's background. Maybe that sheriff's not the great person that you think, right? Maybe other people will believe the facade. Maybe he puts on a great political ad campaign or kissing lots of babies, right? It's like, look at how great I am of a person. But some people, maybe people within his own family, realize that, oh yeah, you ever seen this guy when he's had a few drinks? Whatever scenario you set up. But I guess what I'm saying is if you're saying about this sheriff, even if we do the thing with 100 people, and let's say that you could get all 100 people to say we need the sheriff to be so let's say I'm at the saloon and someone steals my wallet and the sheriff's dealing with another incident or something, like, or that person has got pointing a gun to my head and say, give me your wallet or else. I mean, that sheriff's not exactly close enough now, or maybe
you take him out, right?
Right.
It's Wild West. You take him out.
Right. So then what? So then if that's the case, I take them out, then that threat is actually going to be much more of a deterrent to the thief than even now. Like a thief right now today will go steal stuff because the cop's not on every corner. There's not a cop at every car, at every household, at every store. So, criminals make that calculation every day that I'm going to go hopefully pick the place where there is no cops standing there waiting to capture me as I try to proceed with my crime. So to me, once again, really at the end of the day, and you've basically just admitted, the only one that you have to protect or defend yourself ultimately from those potential threats that you have is you or the people that are immediately there in your surroundings. So that to me is wise. It would be a wiser. I definitely, I have in my life, if someone's threatening me or if there's something they're trying to steal from me, I'm not just going to wait. I'm not going to be like, hold on a sec here, let me call the cops or the sheriff. And because I know that either my life will be taken, my wallet will be taken, the crime will already have been committed by the time the cops ever show up. So to me, it's why delegate that authority to some third party when I should be the one taking and assuming that responsibility myself to protect myself, right? That's really what it comes down. And then you just extrapolate and use that premise and that principle for everything in society.
Well, I would say that premise is not good enough to create an entire political philosophy around. That point is the exact exemplar of why self-defense is a right, but not necessarily why no government is right. But it is definitely the exemplar of self-defense,
right?
Like that everyone has a right to defend themselves, whether a cop is present or not.
Right. But okay. So once again, I think we're still getting further away from what you define as, because I'm trying to work from your definition, but I'm still wondering what government is to you then, because government, every structure, whether it's pharaohs, kings, like any kind of monarch, kings, queens, right? Dictators, democracies, republics, every form of government through all of history has always had the underlying premise that you're the human, or the people, the citizens, the serfs, whatever, are somehow delegating, like you say, that the position of being the final arbiter or disputer of any criminal proceedings or court proceedings or anything in terms of if someone broke one of those moral or ethical laws that we both agree upon. Is it all you're doing is giving them the authority that you no longer have yourself. And then if they have the authority, then the rest of the citizens in society, like what I think what you're doing is if you did that, like initially, just like with the US, it works for a while for sure. Like if you started an entire system based on what you're suggesting, that will work for a while. But just like a lot of people in the past come to realize is the minute you've delegated that responsibility and given them, that kind of authority, well, the thief or the intelligent thieves, the ones that are really devious, not the typical pickpocket or petty criminal, but the really devious thieves are like, well, why would I take that responsibility myself of going to steal from people when I can just call myself a politician, say that I need taxation to be able to support and sustain my government so that we can have all these things like courts and all this stuff. And then once I've got all the authority and I can now start, bringing in the money because of my authority, well, now I've created a nice little scenario where, hey, I'll just start doing things. I've got all the power, I've got most of the guns, and now I've got the money. So why am I restraining myself when I now am the one that can be, now the new king, the new pharaoh, the new dictator, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
So I want to jump back all the way back to the beginning of that, where you say like, because let's put a dividing line then between instantaneous retaliatory force and a long-term retaliatory force.
Right.
So a thief comes up to you in the Wild West and he points his gun at you and says, give me all the gold you got. It's your right by the self-defense that we've established that you could just shoot him dead there. He's trying to not just take your gold, but he's trying to take your life. Because it took effort to get that gold, and that effort, and that effort was also going to be used further for your life. Yes. So he's not saying I'm taking your gold; he's saying I'm taking your life.
Yeah, or at least a portion of it, for sure. Yeah.
And by the traitor principle, if he's offering you death, then the only thing you can offer him in return is death.
Yeah.
So instantaneously, you got self-defense. Well, let's say he robs you while you are at the saloon, but he robs your home. While you're out. Well, now the question comes, is everyone capable of being a good enough detective to follow a certain standard of proof in order to find out who did it and then how to go about holding them responsible?
Yeah.
If your neighbors, every single one of your neighbors all had the responsibility for themselves to be their own detectives, and one of them got robbed, and they just start walking around, going door to door, kicking in doors, going like, I know you took it. Like that's what objectivism wants to remove from society. It's that long-term retaliatory force. If a crime needs to be prosecuted and you need to do detective work, then there needs to be a certain system is established to do that detective work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's where I would suggest in any community, anywhere you live, where people live and cohabitate together, just like now with anywhere. You don't need government. There's lots of people that actually create little organizations in their community for lots of things, right? For a multitude of things. And once again, that is completely fine. And I'm completely open to allowing anybody. And that's the way it should be, is people should be able to, if they need to hire someone to do something that they can't, or they need an investigator. But once again, as a libertarian or a philosophical anarchist, even if you want to say, is yes, but we don't have to delegate. When I sign a contract with an private investigator to do something for me, there's going to obviously be rules within that. And those rules in anyone in any societies, no one's going to sign up to anywhere or live anywhere where you're like, oh, we just use vigilante justice and anybody can just go out and knock down anyone's doors anytime they want. No, because that's the thing. The beautiful thing about people, even in my community, there's some bad people. I know there's some bad people that probably like steal from me, but you know what? It's not that they're fearful of the police station, which is where I live 40 minutes away. What they're fearful of is if I see them, that I'm going to, or if I don't see them, let's say they steal when I'm not looking. Well, if I find out who they are, matter of fact, they're probably going to be more fearful of what I'll do to them, I would suggest, than what to the police, because the police will take through the courts. There'll be some aspect where they'll run through things, and maybe there'll be punitive monetary damages that will be cited on. But once again, if the guy says, well, I don't have anything, well, the judge, you can't get blood from a rock kind of a deal. So what are you going to do at the end of the day? It's really what you're talking about is what I think what you're setting up here is you need government. So basically what you define government is just some entity or some other people that you want to be, right, that retaliatory force. Maybe not in the immediate time, but somebody's got to be the retaliatory force, or to collect on, the proceeds of theft, to put them back in the hands of the original owner, whatever that is. And like I say, I would suggest that that's fine and dandy, but by doing that, you're not giving any of these people. So whether it's a private investigator, a private court, nobody thinks like, if I go to Walmart, I know what the rules of engagement, I know what their store policy is and all that stuff. But I don't have to, like, Walmart doesn't think that they have authority over me, right? That's the big difference between Walmart and government is, yes, I could use Walmart for things, or I could use a hospital or a school, but as long as the people that are in these organizations don't have any pretense that they have authority over me or the rest of society to do things that none of us are allowed to do. Because really that's what we're talking about at the end of the day is government has this pretense, like taxation. There's every government that's ever existed, right? Taxation. And what is taxation? But it's just a form of theft under the guise of for the greater good. But what all they're doing is taking from you without your permission, which is what you would be fearful of someone else doing, in society. So I'm saying, let's be fearful of people that will steal any portion of our income, but at least the thief doesn't have any belief that they have any legitimate claim to do so. Whereas people in government, I have my neighbors, if the tax man rolls up in my driveway today and says, we need that tax money that you haven't been paying in the government, and you better pay it up, or else next month we'll send, other people, or all of my neighbors would allow that to happen. Why? Because they believe that these people have the authority to take a portion of my income. That's always the biggest fear I have for people that want to leave that little construct for government, is you're just allowing people to leave an exemption or an exception in their mind where some people can do things in society that none of us could ever do legitimately or with any authority.
Well, I would agree with you that I'm against taxation.
Yeah.
It's so my government in that sense, also seeing as they only get that right of self-defense basically from the people, that they, as you state, they don't have a right to steal. I don't have a right to steal, so the government doesn't have a right to steal. Mm-hmm. And so in that one instance, I would say we agree. But I want to get to then say, do you believe in competitive governments, or say you wouldn't use the word government probably?
Well, so, no, because that's what I mean. Because
or
no, because government has a meaning, and unless we're doing what you're doing, where you're kind of redefining what that meaning is, that's the weird part about these conversations, and why it's really difficult to have them is if you can't accept the definition. I get you might not like the definitions, but that is, and it's not that and if you know how the proper dictionaries work, it's not that these people that own Webster's or Oxford just are creating these things. It's how natural language expand.
I get how a dictionary works, but I'm saying what then is your system?
All it is just like when I raised my family, or when I socially or economically engage with other people on the planet, which I've done many times in my almost 50 years, is just those very defined rules that actually most of us learn them pretty early on. Usually by the time we're 4 or 5 years old, most of us have come to realize that theft is wrong, murder, rape, all those things that every human being, you know, there might be some that might disagree with it, but those are the ones that probably want to do those things, right? But you can universalize, you know, the ethical and moral principle of, you know, thou shalt not steal, that, you know, those kind of things. So all I'm saying is when I go out in society, I want to be able to engage with people, and I want the people that I engage with, all of our interaction to be voluntary. How people set that up, I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I'm not being a central planner, is I don't know how human beings are going to use that kind of, authority that they are supposed to take is in terms of personal responsibility and restrain themselves. And I don't even expect that all people will. I just know that you don't correct the potential of some people doing bad things by giving other people the legitimacy to do those things, which is what government does. So I would rather take my chance with the potential of the common thief, right, that doesn't have any position of authority, where people will allow them to rob me. I'd rather take my chance with someone that, at least when the rest of my neighbors realize that this person's stealing, even if they don't want to do anything, at least, you know, they're not going to be willing to help the person in the proceed of crime. And I will at least have my ability to defend myself without everyone else ganging up against me because I'm supposed to submit or conform to that kind of theft. That's the big issue that I take with anyone that allows that discrepancy or that exception where you give some people this kind of authority in society. That's always what it is for me.
Isn't that in a sense kind of a faith-based argument? It's
Nope.
like you've replaced God with people in a almost Marxist sense, that it's like the people will come to the right decisions and that
No.
society will be functionally fine.
No, I just told you I don't expect people to make the right decisions all the time, and people have tried
Then
to
why
steal.
wouldn't you want to set up some sort of system that would prevent what you believe will be a downhill like collapse?
How do you set up a system though?
By objective law, by establishing objective law.
Just paint the picture for me. Follow through how that actually goes from the idea to an actual reality in the tangible world.
Okay, well, what would be the purpose of a law?
Oh, let's use that 100. No, let's use that 100 person example that you were using there. So there's 100 people in this town, and now you, like I say, just like as if you started it in the Wild West, kind of that premise. How would you go about, you know, doing what you're suggesting you would do in that with that 100 people in your society? Because you got to remember too, before you actually answer the question, you got to remember, because some of those people in your society, you have those 100 people, there's going to be people that identify as conservatives. There's going to be people that there's going to be people that have a lot of different ideas, preferences, and opinions on a multitude of things than you. But I get that you might have the power of persuasion. You might be a really good salesman. You might have a great pitch, but I'm just talk me through how you make that happen.
Well, that would, in a sense, that's asking that takes it out of context, because how did the Wild West get established in the first place? There was already the Constitution that was set. That Constitution is those ideas, right? So it's like you don't, in a sense, group a bunch of people together and then, in a sense, vote what happens. And I think, in a sense, a lot of libertarian arguments, like, I mean, literally talking like about YouTube conversations, when listening to them, that it seems that most people are missing the fact that human beings are an evolved creature.
Yeah.
That it, like, as you were talking about the dictionary definitions, someone didn't just vote on what to put in there. We've been using them since the dawn of time, in a sense.
Yeah.
We've been slowly building them up.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things that we've built up over time is that especially starting just at infancy, that we get a sort of value system from pleasure and pain. We want to avoid pain and we want to seek pleasure.
Yeah.
Right? But we're not infallible. We can make mistakes.
For sure.
So we also then need to set up some sort of principle for ourselves, just for ourselves, not for everyone else, but for ourselves, that, like,
for sure,
walking into walls hurts. Don't walk in walls.
Good.
Right?
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
a good rule.
A moral system for yourself.
Yeah.
And that, like, I want to pursue these values because they are good for me. What I do with my brain and my body is good for me. And if I do it within any random way I want, I can hurt myself. So I need to do it within a certain method. So if you establish a moral system for yourself, living on a desert island by yourself, you should still establish a system of ethics that says, I'm going to eat these things because they're good for me, and I'm going to avoid these things because they make me sick every time.
Mm.
And then if other people showed up
Well,
to
but
that
that's
system,
not really
go, okay,
ethical. That's not
what?
really that wouldn't be really
That's
ethical.
where libertarians and objectivists disagree. Objectivists hold that an ethical system exists for yourself, by yourself.
No, I get what you're saying, but you're saying like as if you were to eat some things, but how is that ethical or moral?
Because if you were to eat nothing but rotten shellfish, that would be immoral. You are doing what is harmful to your life. The whole point of ethics is the basis of ethics is the standard of life. Life is the standard.
Well, no, but ethics is usually when we interact with each other. That's what we use ethics, right? And
And that's
moral.
where objectivism and libertarianism disagree.
Well, you'll have to once again expand on that. I've heard like a few other people talk about that in a certain way, but it's not in the way you're kind of describing it right now. So maybe it's just a matter of like we're just using different examples. Because to
Well,
me,
what does it mean to be moral?
well, once again, to do something that causes harm, whether it's theft, rape, murder, assault, all these things towards another person. That's what I would consider to be unethical or immoral.
And that's the problem.
If I want to do something to myself, even if you an external observer, but even I don't even know how you'd have the external observer aspect brought in it, because you're saying I'm alone on an island. So, but if I want to do something to myself, and if I'm making that choice voluntarily, I don't know how that's unethical or immoral because I'm making that choice voluntarily. Maybe because that's the thing. The premise you set up, you got to remember there's always countless examples. Let's say, I cut myself on a really sharp rock while looking for fish in the ocean and I'm bleeding out and it's going to take a while. And it's getting really painful, but there might be a way if I can eat this berry that's poisonous and it'll put me out of my misery instantly. See, this is the thing that you really got to be careful of when you're setting up these isolated incidents or examples to put forth, because there's always nuance to that. Just like that example where people use with, well, if it was a train barreling down the tracks, right, and it divides, it splits into two different ways, and there's three people on one track and one on the other. Most people say, well, the best thing you can do, and objectivists would probably suggest this too, is, well, numerically wise, it's better to only kill one person than three, because at least three people survive. And it's sad that one has to die. Although first of all, that the whole paradigm changes entirely. If that one person is your son, your daughter, or your mother, or your father, you're going to make a totally different mental calculation. It's not because you're unethical, because in reality, I'm sure as a person, I'd be like, I don't want nothing to happen to anybody. But if we know that there's going to be a result regardless, the train's going to do one thing or the other, I'm going to tell you right now, and I would not consider it unethical. I would feel terrible for the people that died, but I most certainly would not consider it unethical that I wanted to save my own son or my own mother, right? So this is the problem when you set up these scenarios, and that's why
I don't see a problem actually, though.
You don't? Okay,
No.
Go ahead.
So let's do the train example, the classic train one, but let's remove the family issue first. Right?
Okay.
It's just one stranger versus five strangers.
But then now you're just doing a scenario where you can make it work better for you. That's
no, because I'm gonna go into it with the family right after that.
Okay, cool.
So starting with just one stranger versus five strangers, the objectivist ethics states that you are not morally obligated to do anything.
No, that's true. Yeah.
You didn't establish that, you didn't tie them to the rails, you didn't put the train on the tracks. That
Yep.
it's if it is not of value to you to save those people, then it is not. Then you don't have to.
Right. I agree with you there.
But it's like, then put your child on the track versus those five people, right? Now there's a value to you.
Yes.
And morally, the same instance of just, it comes down to like one person, even if they're on a desert island, I want that value. That child brings value to my life. I don't care about the other people. It's morally right for me to save my child over those others. That's what objectivism would say, because it's about values. It's not so much about it's not about numbers it's about you. Your moral system is based around you. Human beings, we don't differ metaphysically, and we don't differ epistemologically. Right. Our differences start morally.
Right. Well, this is the part where I'm trying to get to, and that's the most important part that we got to get to then is, and maybe we should stop using these because this is one thing, like I said, and I've seen this can actually chew up a tremendous amount of time in any conversation if you keep using these examples. And for everyone that you bring up, trust me, I can bring up for two or three, and we'll spend all day long talking about, because the alone on the island and stuff. Yes, that's the point though, is the only thing that really, like all those things that you place in the moment, there's always going to be things that are going to come up that actually are completely out of what we're even perceiving right now that might be some potential, because people are always coming up with new ones, right? Like, oh, we've heard the train one, we've heard this one, we've heard that one, but they'll come up with, but once again, all we really need at the end of the day as the basis, if we're going to socially and economically engage, because if you're talking about the island or alone on the island, there's nobody else there. So what does it even matter? To me, it's like, I get that you can try to, like, if you're just like an intellectual that just loves hammering out all these little instances or examples, that's great. I'm all for it. But what we really need as human beings, and what most of the time I think works best for us as a strategy, is when we're dealing with other people, is how do we, whether it's your immediate family, extended family, people in your community, or anyone on the globe for that matter, is when you're out and dealing with other people and you're not by yourself, is what are the rules of engagement? That to me is the part that really matters most in terms of what when you're going to have anything in terms that's entrenched or baked into the ethical and moral dilemma, is what are the rules of engagement when you're dealing with people out there, whether it's socially or economically. And to me, the most simplistic way, and it works out for most people most of the time, doesn't mean it's perfect, it never has been, is, don't steal, don't rape, don't assault, don't murder. Those things doesn't mean that there aren't bad things that might happen to you, but I say doing those things, and if you universalize them to the point where most people believe that is the proper way for people to socially and economically engage, it gives us the best chance at freedom in society. And it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed it, because there's no guarantees with anything. Like, my biggest problem is when you set up the construct called government, even if you write in with parchment or paper and you're really clear and concise in your language that no, you cannot step outside these bounds, what you're ultimately doing at the end of the day is you're arbitrating an authority to someone that, and you're kind of hoping that they will adhere to the authority that you've delegated to them. And once again, I just don't have that much faith in my fellow man, woman, child. And there's lots of people like Ron Paul, perfect example, is one of those people that I would say, man, if I was going to delegate my authority to a limited government statesman, boy, it would be Ron Paul. But even Ron Paul, I don't trust to give him that much authority over millions and millions of people, because I'm not sure what that kind of power would do to his mind, which is why, and the old Lord Acton, power corrupting thing, is humans are fallible. So all I ever suggest is let's just stop thinking that we have to delegate these kinds of authorities to people and hope that they use them responsibly. Because
you do hold that we delegate those powers to everyone and hope that they use it responsibly.
Yes, right. But that's the thing. As long as it's everyone, then we can hold each other to account. If like
by what system do we hold each other account, though? Just another person's discretion.
Well, no, because we all, like you would admit, everyone has a legitimate authority to defend themselves against people that are trying to cause harm them. So at the end of the day, is as long as
my issue is what constitutes defense, because I know a lot of Christians that when I start poking holes in their arguments, they believe that they are morally obligated to punch me. And that it's wrong. That they are defending themselves because they also hold that those ideas, and that, like, and Marxists hold that ideas are violence. Right. Yes. So depending on the fact that you're putting this in the hands of everyone, some people are going to delegate that they are defending themselves because you spoke to them.
Well, that's the person that's obviously not acting rational, right? If you just said words to them and those words weren't like, you got a secret army behind your back and your words were, okay, charge and kill that person, right? If you were just saying something that they disagreed with and they said that they have some legitimate right or authority or claim that they could cause harm to you physically for doing so, then I would point out to those people that they're the person that's acting immoral and unethical. But that's the thing. Whether they come from the right or left,
if you don't have a standard system for that, then you can't hold that. You can't absolutely hold that they acted immorally. You can only say that based on their choices of delegation, that you think that they're acting immorally, but to them they're not. And what system then says, like, oh, can we charge them? Can we take them to a court? Like, how do you even know if you can take someone to court in a system like that?
Well, just like now, we have courts, we have all those structures, and we see like how many countless examples is that's the thing that I always wonder about is are we always supposed to just completely forget about the real world that we live in? This is the problem I have with the people that leave that space for government is we're just supposed to all forget about the actual reality that we live in, and we're constructing. This is why, to me, it's really utopian, and I don't mean that to be so a denigrating or an insult, but
it's okay. I feel like in 4 years,
no, but because and here's the especially with objectivists, people that come from the objectivist philosophy is like because usually these people are really critical thinkers, and I'm not suggesting you're not, but maybe you just haven't had time enough to digest and run this through. And once again, not saying that's bad. I'm not saying anything bad towards you because myself, I've gone through the process too. Because trust me, there for a while, like years and years ago, I took the exact same position you are. So please don't think that I'm even trying to attack you here because I basically had to have the same thing confronted to me. I had to work through this logic in my own mind so many times, and I get that it's not good. It can feel uncomfortable and all that, but trust me, I have nothing but good intentions here. What I'm saying though is, if you believe that there are certain people in society that are going to do bad things, and we all know this is reality, is why set up a construct where you're delegating this authority to do things once again, because in government they're allowed to do things that we're not allowed. But what you're setting up is it sounds almost, tell you the truth, if we took all these some of the words out of it and we just kind of left most of what we were talking about, I would think that you were taking Stephen Molyneux's stance, because it sounds like you want to create like a, what does he call them again? Dispute resolution, whatever the heck, right? Remember that? So I'm saying it almost sounds like what you're advocating for is like a dispute resolution entity or something that to be like the night watchman, or because government is not that. Government is the pretense of being able to do things that no human being has the capacity or legitimate authority to do. So if you want to set up, and you keep saying system, so you want to set up a system, but that kind of doesn't that rest and rely on that everyone else wants to agree to that system? Because my thing in life is I would like that to be happening. It'd be great if everyone would agree to that. But I got to tell you, there are a lot of people on this planet that would say, yeah, no, I don't want to agree to that system because now I'm at a great disadvantage, right?
Thing is, I don't need anyone to agree in that sense.
But how do you not?
Because it's objective truth.
Right.
If it's objectively true to do a certain way, then you can stop people from acting outside of it.
No, I get it. What you're saying is an objective truth, but how do you prevent a criminal from preventing or from acting out a crime? Like, do you just say, hey,
you never stop a criminal from, in the sense that your system can't stop the criminal either. There's a crime's going to be committed.
Yeah, exactly.
How do we handle the after effects of that?
Right. Or if you're, more proactive, that's the thing in a free market environment with me not have to rely on, I would find access to technologies, to, safes, to, having my own means of defense, maybe cameras around my perimeter. I mean, there's a multitudes of ways, especially in the modern world we live in, where I can find, like I say, a multitude of ways to help protect and defend myself against any kind of external threats or even my possessions. There are lots of ways to do. Now, is that going to be perfect? Of course not. And there's never going to be. That's the thing. There's never going to be, whether, like I say, whether it's Marxists or any, there's nobody. I don't ever believe that we're going to live in this world, and that's why I prepare and I act out, traveling down I know theft is wrong, but I'm not walking downtown Queen Street, and I'm a pretty rugged guy. I can handle myself pretty good, but I'm still not walking down Queen Street with a stack of $100 bills hanging in my back pocket. Why? Because it's illegal, and I know they all know that it's illegal, but is that going to stop them from stealing? Probably not. So once again, I have to be proactive and do that for myself and find out methods or measures or means that I can use to do my best job at protecting myself. That's what I do with my family. That's what I did with my children when I was raising them. Even when they were going to school or going to play into the woods or climbing on a rock pile, there's all kinds of threats and potential dangers out there. All I can rest and rely on at the end of the day is, have I given them a good understanding of right from wrong? Do they understand the dangers that are omnipresent around them at all times, and give them, like I say, the tools to think critically about issues. And once again, hopefully that'll work out as best it can. And it has. Doesn't mean it's perfect. People lose loved ones all the time for, making foolish mistakes or a slip up or went to the wrong place at the wrong time. So once again, I realize that there's never going to be a perfect solution or prevent bad things from happening from anyone at any time. But what I have noticed over the course of all of human history, for every small petty thief or even small band or gang of criminals, if I compare and contrast to what governments have done over the course of all of history, the petty thieves and the petty criminals pale in comparison to what the state has represented in terms of violence, coercion, theft, rape. I mean, come on, slavery was legitimate. Slavery was actually, completely legal, right? People believed that it was legal because some people said that, yeah, it's completely legit to own other human beings. Like, what the hell, right? So that's always my issue that I take is, like, they sound good in theory, but I always worry about, but we have to live in the real world.
Well, to hit on the real world, I would say, well, did you miss all the historical context where anarchy took over and people were killed as well? And then dictators rose up from those. But actually, you didn't actually fully answer the question. You added something to it, but it's like, crime is going to be committed.
Yep.
You've added, you can be proactive about it by setting up, like, making it more difficult for them to do it. But it's still going to happen. The question is, what do we do now after?
Well, you can try your best. Like I say, what I would do, well, actually, I've actually lived this. If you want, I can even give you a perfect example of it. So I had to leave my home because of something that happened to me in the past in terms of losing my job and occupation, thanks to big government. Anyways, and I had to rent out my house while I was gone. Well, the people that rented my house seemed like really great people. He worked as a taxi driver. His wife worked at McDonald's. They had a couple kids, and we kind of tested them out, and they seemed like reasonable people. And long story short, they ended up taking us for 6 months rent, stole my 4-wheeler out of the driveway, sold a car that we had here, a old winter beater I had that I had backed up to the garage to protect my contents inside. Stole my 4-wheeler, stole a bunch of my tools, my chainsaw and stuff. And you know what? I didn't even rely on, because even if I had to call the cops, it would have been, okay, what's missing? We're taking a report. And I've heard of so many times and so many examples over the course of my life of people that have had something stolen from them. Very, very few times do you ever get your possession back. If they stumble across it, let's say they do a drug bust somewhere and they just happen to find a whole bunch of extra stuff, then you might get lucky, but it's kind of like rolling the dice. What I did is I got my son, we did our own little thing, and it was my son and his cousin actually heard or saw a guy had posted a picture of the 4-wheeler, which was mine, and we all recognized, well, he did at the time, recognizes mine. We set up our own little thing. I got my 4-wheeler back, and the police didn't do any of that. I got it back myself with the help of, like I say, family members and friends, just being proactive. Nobody went to cause the guy, nobody went to his house and like beat him up or pull any weapons on him. And I got my bike back. And it's unfortunate that, when I got it back, it was in a lot more parts than it was when when it was still here in my garage, but I got it back. But once again, I've had to accept that, even whether it was the police or even when I got it back myself, I've had to accept the fact that, I could even, let's say, create a lawsuit, $125, go do a civil lawsuit. He's a young guy that has nothing. He doesn't even have a job. What is that going to do for me? It's not going to do me one bit of good. So I basically just had to accept that, there was a portion of my productive income, a substantial portion, because it was a pretty expensive 4-wheeler. I invested a lot of money in it, that unfortunately was taken. And there's not a damn thing that I'm really going to be able to do about it in the course of my life. I've had to accept that. I have to move on and not, sit and stew with the fact that that's another unfortunate reality in life, is sometimes things are going to happen bad to us, that are outside of our control. And that whether you have big government or no government, you might never get a remedy that's going to be, that's going to be restorative enough that you're going to feel whole once again. That's just a reality. It was a tough pill for me to swallow, because like I say, I mean, of course I was pissed off and upset about the fact, because just like you were saying early on, it's not just that he took my 4-wheeler. It's how much of my every day when I was going to work, right? And have to, put in all those hours. It was basically like they enslaved me for that portion, right? So I'm totally with you on board there. The difference is I just don't think that having this entity called government and trying to delegate that responsibility to them has ever worked out beneficial. And to be honest with you, we got a pretty good evidence in the past to show that it's basically universal that all governments end up being tyrannical in some forms. Now, there's different levels for sure, but this anarchy that you're suggesting, that's usually what happens in these times when you're suggesting there's anarchy. What usually happens, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, is like, let's say during the French Revolution, yeah, you could suggest there was times that there was anarchy, right? But what it was was just that the particular ruler of the time was toppled, and in the interim, there was still all the order followers. There were still lots of people that believed in the state or the monarch. That violence was actually a consequence. That anarchy, the violence that was exhibited after the taking out the king or whatever, was a direct consequence because a whole lot of people believed in that particular authority and a whole lot of people didn't. Right, so that's where the conflict started, was the fact that there was a state to begin with. Right, if there wasn't a state, and if people just like that island, if people, were all on an island instead of just one, if you had 100 people, if you never set up a state, but everyone kind of got together once in a while to talk about things like, hey, we want to build a road. Like, how should we do? As long as you didn't give anyone in that tribe or that group this authority to, okay, you're going to be the sole one that gets to do all the, we decide what we want to happen, but we're going to delegate the authority to you to decide how that all takes place or how it's done. Then once again, then we've taken all that personal responsibility away from ourselves, and that's usually a time that I would be concerned, unless it was something like an economic venture where you're not talking about any force involved, right? If I wanted to get a bunch of people together and spend money and we all did it voluntarily, that's fine. And if what you're suggesting is basically the same kind of thing where all the people does it voluntarily, then I would say I'm with you. Matter of fact, the debate is over, but let's just not call it government.
What was you just stated something a little, like a few seconds ago here. I just, I guess I missed it, but,
sorry, man, what was that?
There was something you had said that it sparked something, but then I think it instantly disappeared out of my head there.
But wasn't about delegating or being. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, one thing I was thinking though while you were speaking is like it's almost as if objectivists think of like libertarians, that they're like democratic socialists without establishing any verbal communication, and that like anarchists and libertarians seem to think of objectivists as stating they want a republic, but actually wanting to instate feudalism. Seems to be.
Yeah, well, let me answer that question for you, because like I say, I can't speak for anyone else. That's the problem with it, and that's why I love about dealing with people on the individual basis, is because I don't know what other people are saying. But for me, I don't think nothing. As a matter of fact, I have a tremendous amount of respect for objectivists. Actually, Ayn Rand is probably one of the greatest influences, and actually that was the thing that I loved in terms of going through this entire intellectual awakening is libertarianism, anarchism, objectivism, all of these things. It's like, matter of fact, they hold so much in common. To me, the part that I find most disturbing is these are usually the people that I would, most of the times in life, is I would want to be associated around these kind of people because they seem to understand things quite well. It's just at the end of the day, it comes down, I think what it is, and because Ayn Rand was the original, she originated the philosophy of objectivism, I think. And I mean, God love the woman for getting herself that far along. I mean, she was an intellectual genius in how far she did. And even she said she basically only attributed most of her philosophy to Aristotle. So she's definitely got most of her thinking entrenched in objective logic. But what it is she still wanted to leave that little bit of area. And I totally get it. Matter of fact, I have nothing against even minarchist libertarians. Here's the thing. I don't have any apprehension towards them other than the fact that it's the unwillingness where the divide usually happens is the unwillingness. And like I say, it's not just towards libertarians, towards objectivists, it's to philosophical libertarians, towards minarchist libertarians, is why do you keep holding out this exception? Your whole premise on your principles are usually baked in or entrenched and built on logic and objective reasoning, right? Using your mind objectively. So why do you want to, other than, and the only excuse I've ever been able to come up with and conjure up in my mind that actually makes sense, it's plausible, is people are scared of the external threat and they think that there's got to be something to like, and they grasp for what they perceive as the state. And you know what? It sounds good in theory. And like I say, I'm totally on board with what Ayn Rand thought, what even the founding fathers, right? The founding fathers, if you read the document, it sounds like if all people just adhere to that document and we all did it universally, like I say, I think the US would be obviously a much freer place than it is now, but would have continued on that tradition. And I think would have expanded around the world, because not only would they have shown in real time how beneficial it would have been, but it would be a perfect example of leading by that example. But once again, every time we set up this premise where we give like the pretense of government, every single time, right? Every single time you end up, because once people have had and they use that power of the tongue, the power of persuasion, then they can basically give themselves power to do all these other things that the rest of us would say, okay, no, you shouldn't have the ability to do that. So if we were all, put it this way, if we all had the kind of thinking skills like you have and what I have, then I would say we can set up. And matter of fact, if we could get our education or our people properly educated and thinking about the issues like you are critically, I'd be completely on board and 100%. And I'd never have an argument with another objectivist or a limited government minarchist. I'd be like, okay, let's get there. Because that little 5% of the what me and the objectivists or me and limited government libertarians argue with is like, that's so minute. I'd be more than happy to live on this planet with that limited government, that night watchman state that Ayn Rand or limited government minarchists promote. I'm completely on board. But what I realize as a philosophical libertarian or as an ANCAP or whatever you want to call it, as an anarchist, is it's always that exception. It's always that exemption that we give to certain people in society to form government. That is the very basis in how that becomes our new oppressor, our new rulers. That's always my biggest concern.
Yeah, I feel typical of most libertarians. It seems, as you're saying, from one point, like from the objectivist, that it's almost like a fear of, like they fear the society, or they feel, so they want some, like big brother state or something.
Yeah.
But I feel almost the opposite way with that libertarians just have a giant fear of maybe anything with the term government or anything large that has any sort of power.
No, not really. Well, not once again, I can only speak for myself. Large doesn't matter nothing to me, especially if it's a natural type of monopoly of any sort, because I do believe that those will definitely exist. Like even now in social media, right? There's a tremendous amount of alternatives. We all know there's lots of alternatives. There's Minds, Gab, and they're doing pretty good and they're growing at a decent size, but they still pale massively in comparison, because most people, as much as Facebook and Twitter and YouTube can really be a pain in the ass and they do mess with people politically, that is true. But there's so many benefits to them that people make that calculation every day where it's like, yeah, they piss me off, but there's enough good about it that benefits me that I'm willing to put up with a monopoly, as long as it's voluntarily and not forced on me. Now, if it ever gets to the point where you have to use YouTube, right? You have no choice, that you can only use YouTube. That's, I think, where we would all part ways and say, okay, no, this isn't wrong. But I don't have nothing against anything that's large or monopolistic, as long as it's based on people voluntarily. Like I say, it always comes back at the end of the day. And I'll even use this example, even back in terms of, because I come from a Christian background. So just so you understand that I'm actually taking this and I expand my thought processes even in that realm, which is once again a mystical entity, right? So we use God as an example. I even understand that as much as I appreciate, this entity that's outside of the earth, of God being because to me, that's a better abstract, because at least that's literally placed outside the realm where humans get to control and manipulate that, right? So God actually sounds even better to me than government, because government is filled with fallible human beings, whereas God is a construct that nobody gets to change it up, and it's external to us, right? And I've even said in the past, but the problem with that is allow that exception in people's minds where there's some mystical entity, then now you got the priest class that do basically the same as the political class, where now they trick the congregate or the flock into believing, because the flock are taught to believe that the preachers, right, that these humans, the politicians or the preachers, are receiving their message straight through God. Well, that's what they always used to say historically. So they took all those beautiful stories in the Bible, manipulated them, reiterated and regurgitated them in a way so that they taught the rest of the people in the society to conform to them or their edicts. But that just made, like, if you're a priest and you want to do the worst things in society, yeah, get everyone else to subject themselves to you because you're the representative of God. And then you can, once again, you can do all kinds of things that are terrible and immoral, but people won't actually go against you because you're doing it because God spoke to you, right? So once again, really all it is at the end of the day is, I think as human beings, to get us past this point where we're at today, and I find that we're as humans, we're kind of like at the adolescent stage. I think just like if you're as a person, like you go through, you do need mom and dad for most of your life, right? And that is true, like until you get up to be at least an adult, and who knows what year that is exactly. Doesn't mean when you turn 18, everyone's going to be the exact same in terms of maturity and ability to take care of themselves. But I'm just saying, at some point in time, human beings, we've figured out that at some point in time, we have to be autonomous, sovereign, and making our own decisions in life. But we still have to, when we're socially and economically engaging with people, have to stick to some very defined rules. Don't hit, don't steal, all those things. That to me is the big thing, is look, we got to get far enough away from leaving these little tiny exemptions for certain people in society to set up a construct where they can use that as a means to subject ourselves, and we'll willingly do so because we've given them that authority.
Yeah, well, it all comes down again. Like, I'm gonna have to keep saying it keeps coming down to morality and ethics, which I find to be about selfishness, right? If you go through Ayn Rand's, like,
self-interest, yes, yes, and
no,
she said,
but no, like, I would say selfishness, and
okay,
like, if you go through Ayn Rand's, like, her objectivism while standing on one foot, it's like metaphysics, reality, epistemology, reason, ethics, selfishness, right? And that, like, your definition that I think we've established in a sense is that your ethical system is based more on social interaction than on, say, self-interaction.
Well, no, but I mean, I don't know what you mean self-interaction though. Like, if
I'm saying that my morality is based on what I do, whether or not I'm around other people, and you're saying that your morality is based only when you're around other people, right?
Well, that to me is the only real reason for morality.
I'd say that's the only real reason for politics. Ethics is about you. Politics is how to expand ethics to everyone.
Well, no, but politics, like, you don't need politics for economics. Like, if I want to,
but politics just means, like, people interacting.
Well, no, politics is people interacting under a form of governance.
No, it's under a form of something.
Yeah, well,
anarchy is a political. You're saying it's a political philosophy. So even though there's no system that they're all under, anarchy falls under.
Well, no, other people might say that anarchy is a political philosophy. I just say anarchy. Once again, I go by the definition, which is, I just don't believe in rulers. Or, like, rulers to me is the same thing. In the old days, you could call them masters, and that was done. People were called. I just don't believe that anyone has any authority to claim any ownership over me or my property or anything that I produce. And so that's all it is. I don't.
No, I agree, and I want to hit a point with your stolen bike thing too. Yeah. I think will hit a big difference and hit a key difference in wording. Okay. That there's a difference between something that is immoral and something that is illegal, right? And in your example of, like, not turning to the police but going and getting it yourself, I would say that I think we would both agree that you were in the right to do so, right? But I would also say that the action itself was immoral. And see, you shake your head, and that's, I think, exactly where we disagree. It depends on what you mean by morality, right? Because my point is, I find it would be immoral because I don't know what the other guy possesses. I don't know how many weapons and how many guys. If you took it down to a chop shop and there's 100 guys and I brought 5, then what I've just done is I've risked my life. And risking my life, that was an immoral act. And so, in the sense that objectivists, in a sense, the point of government is so that you don't have to risk your own life not knowing what's going to be on the other side of that interaction. That you can turn to someone to say, like, especially, let's say, talk about the elderly and the weak. You're going to get them to go get all of their friends down at the nursing home to go, to go find out who robbed them? No, you're going to want someone else to do that, in a sense, right?
Well, it's
But
whatever, however they'd figure it out, whatever they determine as a course of action, as long as they're, like I say, abiding by the same moral or ethical standards that I would uphold for anybody. That's, like I say.
But I would, the issue is that you and I have established right here that we disagree on what moral and ethical issues are. So like right there, like how does one determine that for themselves and then stay within the good graces of everyone else, since morality is about like social interaction? How do you decide that like this person's discretion, did it overstep the bounds or not?
Well, no, but when you were setting up the scenario about, if you showed up there with 5 people and they had 100 people, what would be any different if you called the police? Because for a stolen bike, they're not going to send a SWAT team. They're going to send probably a cop car, maybe 2. And if there's 100 people, they're still in the exact same position. Wouldn't it be immoral? Wouldn't it be immoral for me? If it's immoral for me to put myself in grave harm and possibly have myself killed, wouldn't it be kind of immoral for me to put these other officers in the same kind of grave harm and maybe have more than just one person die, but maybe multiples of them?
But wouldn't your system allow the same thing? Because wouldn't your system allow someone to hire a group of people to do the same thing? The point is that those people volunteered to do so.
Yeah, well,
and
no, but
I didn't volunteer to go and get my stuff back. But there are people who have already volunteered to do that for me.
Right. But if I were to get someone, if I were to hire someone, or if I lived in a community, I wouldn't want to live in a community where people could just do anything they want, like just go into guns a-blazing, who don't even know if there's the 4-wheelers at the guy's house. But hey, we're just on a big rampage today and we feel like killing some people. That's not what I'm suggesting. Once again, we still, no matter
I get that what you're suggesting, though, in a sense, is that like that there are people who are trained.
Mhm.
They're not government, but they're still trained to deal with these situations, right?
Right.
And then in your situation, they'd also be trained. I don't know what law, like in a sense, you have, but that they're trained in some sort of natural law.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, well, then where did they get this training from? And is it standardized across the board?
Well, it doesn't have to be standardized as long as the people are making sure that they're adherent to how they're trained. Maybe they're jujitsu, I don't know, black belts in jujitsu. That part, once again, I'm not a central planner or trying to construct society. I'm just saying, no matter who it is, whether it's one person, a group, or an entire society, all I'm saying is all we have to do at the end of the day is make sure that the fundamental rules of engagement, no matter if it's going to get the bike for someone or whether it's you going to the store or whether you're defending yourself, is just, once again, you stick to those same principles that are baked into the morality.
Has someone written down the principles so that every defense force knows what the principles are?
Well, no, but we all know that. Like like I say, everyone understands from a very early age. It doesn't take much.
I disagree with that.
What
Well,
theft?
people know from an early age. It depends on how you're raised and who's taught you.
Oh, for sure.
You don't just learn that stuff.
Yeah, but how many interactions would you ever have in life? Like, let's set up the scenario that you're paying. Let's say you're a 5-year-old and you steal something from your schoolmate's backpack. There's nobody going to be in society or no one that has any influence on that child that's going to tell them that taking something against someone else's, or even
morals.
What's that?
They've already established that the moral system is about selfishness and individualism. They've already basically established Ayn Rand's definition of morality, that it's bad because you've hurt someone's life. But in a society where like Sharia law is the quote unquote to them the objective standard, then theft from another worshiper is definitely wrong. But theft from the heretic, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, and so in that sense, then it's like, how do we fully establish that their children grow up thinking theft and murder of a certain group of people is okay? And it's like, then you have to then, if those people want to establish some sort of government, or not the government, some sort of defense force in the system, or again, not a system, they want to establish a defense force. How do you go, okay, but make sure that you don't think these things?
Yeah. See, once again, I don't even know where you're going with it. Once again, like I say, I'm just using the scenario that you were saying. So if you're worried about a 5-year-old not being able to figure out that that's wrong, I won't even use the example that they don't. I'll even give you that they don't have anyone in their family, in their community, no neighbors, no friends. They have nobody that's ever taught them that stealing is wrong. Well, they'll find out really quickly when they take something from someone else, and because they think that's okay. And if there's other people in society that think that's okay, well, if that other person comes and takes something from this person against their permission, well, that's a lesson learned right there. And you know what? It's
no, I would disagree with that.
You really would?
Yeah, just psychologically, epistemologically, that is how you were raised in the country that you were raised in. But in some countries where the value system is entirely different, the ethical moral system's different, taking from them is meaningless because they don't believe that they own. Like Buddhists might take something and gather a bunch of rocks and stuff and think for a second that, oh, you know, this is kind of like my property, I'm doing a thing with it. If someone comes and takes it, they don't really think it's wrong. They don't believe in that.
Buddhists don't think if someone takes their stuff that's wrong.
They don't believe in stuff. So if they took your,
Well, what do you mean
in the first place?
No,
then
but did they have stuff?
So the whole ethical system depends on how you value, you know, your life and how you value the rest of the world and how you value good versus bad.
No, but you said they don't believe in stuff. I don't understand that. Do
they don't believe in owning stuff.
They're naked?
No, they don't believe in owning stuff.
So they don't have any possession. They literally live in caves and they're butt naked?
They believe in a sense that theft is a thing because no one should or can technically own things. It's a Marxist too. They don't believe things can be owned, so they don't really have a problem.
Yeah, but they're lying to themselves. Because if someone's saying they don't believe in stuff, yet they got their robes on, they go into their house or their temples, right? That's stuff. So like if people are delusional, they don't know how to perceive the real world around them. I can't help people that are mentally handicapped to the point that they can't, recognize the real world around them. If I say that there's no such thing as stuff and I'm sitting surrounded by stuff, then yeah, I'm messed up, man. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to guide my decisions on life based on people that don't even know how to deal with we are talking about objective reality here, right? I would suggest that the monk or any of these people that suggest that they don't believe in stuff, it's like, really? Well, that's not what the reality around you says. Right?
No, and I would agree that like mentally, that there is in their heads, that they implicitly, they're hitting a contradiction, of course.
Yeah.
Right. But if they've never explicitly thought about it and they've never pulled that out of their mind, they won't, in a sense, think that. They won't. That's how.
Have you ever tested this in real life? Like you're setting up a scenario that I don't think I've ever experienced in real life. Have you in your real life ever met any person that said they don't believe in stuff while they're sitting surrounded by stuff? And then if you go to take anything that's part of their stuff, that they're just going to say, oh, that's fine. Like I don't know. I don't like that's like you have to really stretch your imagination there to create these scenarios. And that's another thing I always wonder is why do people seem so willing to create these amazing constructs that I don't even think science fiction movies could do as good a job at creating these weird scenarios when, like I say, in the real world, we all live in the real world. And I don't know of anybody that I've ever lived in the course of my 50 years, and I've met thousands and thousands of people in my life. Now, once again, it's anecdotal, but every person that I've ever talked to would tell you the same thing, that if someone sat there and said, I don't believe in stuff, and they're surrounded by stuff, and yet if someone come and took all their stuff and they're sitting there naked with nothing to eat, right? No, nothing to even have for substance in themselves. I think at some point in time, even this person that seems to be insane and illogical in the thing is going to realize that, I better start believing in stuff because pretty soon I'm going to die. Right?
Yeah, I think you've taken the like metaphor a little too far. But yes, I would agree that person is mentally ill, but that doesn't change the fact that those people exist. And
sure.
You also then in your system allow those people to be the deciders of their own protections.
No, actually, like I said, once again, it's not a system I'm setting up. But what I'm saying, let's say I was someone that lived close to or knew or this person that is, I would consider them just like I would consider a lot of people that have some kind of handicap, whether it's physical or mental. And I'd be like, we should really help this person to help them better understand that, if you don't believe in stuff, there's people going to come along that's going to take your stuff when you tell them you don't believe in it, because they're going to say, well, hey, if this person doesn't believe in stuff, well, they're not going to miss this when it's gone, right? I would want to help try to alleviate that person's mind from that kind of insanity, because I recognize it's going to be quite detrimental to their life going forward.
So I got a question based on that. Like, in a sense, are you suggesting that, like, say, Marxists and like any believer in anything that is contradictory, that they know that there's a contradiction and they're just lying? Or do you think that they've convinced themselves by not explicitly making it clear that their one idea contradicts another? Like that communist and stuff, they obviously want to take other things. Yeah. But I've never met a communist that enjoyed having their things taken.
Exactly, right. Yeah,
that'll. Are you saying that they're lying, or is it possible that they think they're right because they've never explicitly stated it?
It could be, like I say, unless I can't be in the mind, like I'd have to literally be like a Vulcan and do a mind weld. So I can't imagine what's going on in their mind. I would actually want to press them and ask some questions like right now. And I'd try to dig down to what is the underlying premise that what's getting you to this point in terms of your thinking, right? Because it doesn't seem very logical. And then at that point, based on how honest they were and basically, what they were suggesting as a response, I would go from there. But I can't imagine to know what's in some people's mind. I actually believe, I firmly believe that a lot of people that are taught like Marxist ideology and stuff, I believe a lot of them genuinely are just people that have, compassion and the things, because, they sound great. Some of the things about Marxism, it sounds good. It really, really does. Sounds good. Even some of the things in terms of Christianity, some of the stories in the Bible, they really sound good. The difference is that you have to be able to weed out the thing using your objective mind and testing some of these things out, right? Based on reality, not just in the abstract, because the abstract's great. Theory is great. And I'm all for theory, but you have to test these things out in the real world. And what I would say is once you've done that, then it's usually a pretty simple equation to figure, okay, this is what I got to weed out, because I see that doesn't properly apply or applicable in the real world. It's only theoretical where that works. And it's fine to keep that as a, if you want to, even Marxists that want to sit out and figure, okay, maybe we can come up with supercomputers that'll figure out the price mechanism. I mean, go for it. Do your thing. Once again, all that matters to me at the end of the day is for people to understand that what we currently understand today and what has been the course of all of history is this thing that's called government. Like I say, and there's many different iterations of it, just like with Christianity. There's Christianity, there's Islam, but there's all kinds of subsects to that too, right? So you got, in Christianity, you got Catholics, Protestants, Presbyterians, Wesleyan, Baptists. I mean, and they all interpret the Bible in their own way. And if you get them all together, they all have these different ways of arguing about they're reading from the same text, right? But that's the thing with humans. They want to interpret it based on their own personal life experiences, their environment, right? Their culture. There's so many factors that influence a person's mind. But for people like you or I, objectivists, is our premise, just like a scientist is, I'm a scientist, I would think I should be able to have a much better discussion in terms of mathematics than what are those calls, that just believe in the astrologists or whatever, right? So that's what I mean. So for an objectivist, and because we're the one having the conversation today, I don't want to worry about what other people will say or do. I'm just saying for you, because you are an objectivist, which means you obviously use your brain in that logical manner, which I really appreciate that, because like I say, even if we don't end up even fully agreeing at the end of this conversation, one thing I do like having conversations with, whether it's objectivists or libertarians, at least I know at the end of the day, you're in the search and the pursuit of truth and knowledge, and you're trying to figure this stuff out just like I am. So all I'm saying is, let me, throw a couple scenarios your way. You can do it for me, like I say, and I'll definitely digest all that you've said today. But I think if you're consistent in your logic and your thinking, which I think you are so far, you seem to be pretty good at it, is you too will come to the reason. And once again, even when I say that there's no such thing as legitimate government, I'm not saying, and here's the part I think that a lot of people don't realize, But I always try to emphasize, it's not that I'm suggesting that we got to vacate or eliminate the state at any time. Matter of fact, when I hear other people talk about revolutions or we got to tear this down, I say, no, actually, just like with anything in society, when you want to create or develop change, right, is no, just show anew, just like in the marketplace, show a better business or a better model where people will gravitate to, but it's in a manner that's more conducive with peace and harmony among people. That's all I'm saying. Don't try to vacate the state. Don't try, just like a religious person. I could try to go up to a Catholic fundamentalist and suggest that, God doesn't exist, right? But boy, that's probably not going to work out very well. But if I show some of the things that they believe in the Bible, and I can show that, you know what, if you test this out, it doesn't work out consistently. And actually, it's going to be a detriment to your, I don't know, it could be your social life, could be your economic life. If you follow through with these false premises or beliefs, you'll see that it's actually going to be a detriment. Whereas me over here in the objective world, right, you'll see that it actually works out quite well if you test things out objectively. So that's all I'm suggesting to you is, it's not that I want to eliminate the state. It's just that belief in statism, it is just like the belief in God. It's a construct that's been put in us to keep us kind of willing to subject ourselves. And most of the time, the people that do it for good reasons. They think, well, we can't have like people just doing, just like what you're suggesting. We can't have people doing all these different crazy things. And I'm just as fearful as you, as like if there was a breakdown and destruction in society, because yes, there are definitely potential where some people that can do some bad things. But I also recognize that fear does exist and that potential exists. But in the real world right now with the state, every day, it's not just a hypothesis. It's not just a theory. Every day, people are socially and economically enslaved and having their lives dictated by people who claim to have the authority to do so when in reality they don't. And that's the worry that I have, is that people, it's the belief in statism, just like the belief in slavery. The reason why the plantation owners could keep the plantations going and the police would come and enforce them if a slave tried to escape was because everyone believed in it. And that's the part that I think is most disconcerting for me, is that belief in the state, because it makes people irrational and willing to do things that are not just counterproductive, but quite detrimental to them and the rest of people in society.
I would, in a sense, I would agree that establishing something like that, you're going to get some people who are going to be like, okay, well, if someone else is going to do it for me, then why should I do it at all? Which is exactly what you get from the Democrats, right? It's like, yeah, I know we got Second Amendment rights, but the government's got that handled, right? So why should we have it?
Yeah.
Just because some people will do that doesn't mean that establishing a government in a sense is the wrong thing to do. Because I would say the same thing is possible. It's impossible to talk about anarchy because it's always like you can't establish an anarchy system. But like in that, some people would do the same thing. But actually, we jumped from almost like metaphysics all the way back up to politics. And I wanted to go back, and you're talking about like objective world, but then I also want to call you out or question you on theory versus reality.
Right.
It's like, in my point of view, that if something is objective, then it works in theory because it works in reality. It works in reality because like it being objective, that it does both. And so I want to know, in a sense, how you can say that something is objective, works in like theory, but then doesn't work in reality. And then how is that objective in the first place?
That I would say it's subjective. So just to clarify, if it's something that's theoretical and has no basis in objective reality, then I would say you're still in the theoretical space. You're not in the objective.
Can there be an objective theory?
It depends on what you're talking about, for sure. Like that's one thing that I think Stephen
morality.
Sorry?
Say morality. Can you have an objective morality?
Yeah, well, that's the area where I think it's definitely something that's still got to be thoroughly discussed, and people are doing today. Like I'm really thankful to have people like you listen to Sam Harris, you listen to Jordan Peterson, you get lots of people now, even Richard Dawkins, and people that are atheists, or what was it, Brett Weinstein that even was talking about this stuff, and what was the name, the God gene, or whatever. So even people that are completely entrenched in the scientific or objective mind realize that there's got to be some way to take it out of the mystical realm. And this is going to be the most difficult thing for humans because, historically, the way we've thought about morality and ethics, it is a human construct. In nature, there isn't such a thing. Although if you look at it, and observe nature enough, sometimes you can say, well, that kind of looks like morality, right? Like they can do things that seem benevolent, but are they really doing so? Because you can't really be in the minds of an animal. But in terms of the human experience, the one thing that I've understood, and like I say, not just Ayn Rand's objective philosophy, but a lot of the great thinkers of the Enlightenment and stuff, and then in comparison or in conjunction with Stefan Molyneux adding his own little layer to it with the UPB, I really do hope that at some point in time that we can make it so scientific because it's provably and objectively true in terms of like the ethics. So the non-aggression principle, I firmly believe, if you use the proper, like what most libertarians or even objectivists would agree, like stealing is wrong and murder and I think those things. Now there's all kinds of other aspects of humanity where there is some fluctuation. There's some subjective aspects to it. And there's things that we're going to have to hammer out and discuss. That's for sure. That's 100%. Because like I say, we have not, as humans, we haven't figured this stuff out to the point where even just a smaller group of us will understand it and accept it and adopt it universally. It's a long-term process I think for us to get humans, whether it's 7 billion of this or if it's 10 billion in 50 years or so, on board with thinking in this kind of manner. But at the very least, we can figure out that, you can universalize, don't hit, don't steal. So like those things, and then leave the rest of this stuff in terms of still being malleable and for people to constantly think about it, as long as they have that very basis that at least don't hit, at least don't steal, at least don't murder or rape. If we can just have those fine rules, I like using this. I don't know if you ever heard me say this before, but I just think that like, even for people that sit down, if you were going to sit down and play a board game or anything, because that's really, if you talk about life and government or how we socially or economically engage with each other, what it is we're just constructing things just like we were constructing in a board game. And at the end of the day, all I really want is that if we're going to define rules for engagement, whatever we're doing, whatever we're undertaking, we just can't leave any exceptions where one person or one group or, gets any get out of jail free card kind of deal, right? That's all I really want at the end of the day. How that comes about, hell, I don't know. I'm hoping that a lot of people with a lot greater minds than me will help figure this stuff out in the future. But I just don't think that if we deny the very real fact, I don't think we have a very good basis or foundation for what we're going to do going forward if we don't at least accept the fact that there's no such thing as of having legitimate government as it's been defined throughout history and as it's defined today. Like if there's something that's going to be in the future that you would use as an arbiter or the night watchman, I'm all on board with that. If it can be universalized and people aren't having any exceptions to the rule, I'm on board with that. But I just don't think we at that point in time would be able to call it government, right? That's all I'm saying. It's just a matter of, and it's a pretty small disagreement. It's just, let's not use the term government. Just like, today you can do all kinds of things that look like people work and all that, but there's a difference between like being an employee and a slave. Right? So can we at least try to work better so that people can, because that's the big thing with our language is clarity of thought has to derive itself from the clarity of language or should I say vice versa? Because that's really what it is in the day. And I think why we get so stuck with us objectivists or libertarians or anarchists and constantly bickering is, I think a lot of times it ends up being that, and I think it is great that we are seemingly a lot of, I won't toot my own horn, but you and other people, and I guess even myself to a lesser degree, but I think we're fairly smart individuals. And I think what it is we're all just kind of secretly chest pumping to see who's going to be the one that's going to figure out that magic, right? And I don't know, just like you, I don't think you're going to figure it out anytime soon. Hopefully you do. But even if you did, it's going to be, even if you come up with the magic formula, how are we going to translate that in the real world and get everyone else on board to adopt it when they're so heavily indoctrinated into the current paradigm and the current way of thinking in terms of government, right? So that's the issue. But I'm really glad to have these conversations because at least what it shows for not just you or I, but the people who are observing them is that we're just two people trying to figure this stuff out. Because at the end of the day, I think we're both sick and tired of certain people in society using their positions of authority to cause way more harm to people in society than, like I say, than the average typical criminal could ever accomplish.
Yeah, I would agree. But it's like going back to that board game example, yep. The only thing I would say then is like, from my point of view, we're setting up a board game. I just go, we need to have objective rules written on one piece of paper. If we all write our own pieces of paper, things are going to get a little too confusing. And I think, and as we were saying with like, you were saying that maybe we need an objective theory, but maybe it hasn't been established yet. Right. It's like, I think, would you agree with me in the sense that objectivists then think, at the very least, that they think that they have the theory that matches reality, and that your position in a sense is skepticism, that they've reached that?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't just say skepticism because once again, I would go with the skepticism if it wasn't for the fact that I know by testing with those 4 questions that you can't get, like I say, you can't get the authority, like you can't delegate the authority to tax, which is what government does. But you're saying that if we could set up a government that doesn't tax, but then if you have a government that doesn't tax, then it's like, then it's not government. So I that's the part that I have is like when objectivists set up the scenario, but tax it once again, or the social construct or contract even. I mean, it sounds good in theory, and like I say, but because it is a construct, none of us have actually sat down. It's not like once we became of age, let's say 18 or 21, depending on wherever, where you consider an adult. It's not like we sat down, it's like, okay, here's the rules. Because, if we were playing a board game, first and foremost, we all get to enter into that board game voluntarily. Either I can choose to play the game, or I could say, no, you guys play your game. I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to sit in the corner somewhere, right? So that's the big thing is I'm talking when you're talking about a board game or any other thing where we come together, that's voluntary. The state forces us together. That when you're compelling or forcing people and under the umbrella that they're the ones, some externality is creating the rules, and then they're the ones not only that get to create the rules, but they are the ones that ultimately get to what's the word I'm looking for? You said a brain fart is right on the tip of my tongue. They're the ones, get to interpret those rules. And it's like, that's what the Constitution did a great job, but it's the people that are interpreting the rules now that have completely turned them upside down. And I think that's the thing with objectivists, why they leave that little bit of space for the state is they've got it all figured out. It's just that they're kind of going back on their own principles and their own logical reason. That's the basis for their thinking to leave that small exception. And like I say, you would never be able to do that for any other area of life other than the pretense of government. And I'm just saying that's probably the last space in humans' minds in our construct where we got to wipe that stuff out and stop making exceptions, right? If we're going to have something that's supposed to be universalized in terms of morality, then we got to leave out the exceptions. You can't keep an exception in there. And that's what the state represents, is an exception to the rule. Yeah,
well, I would say then, like, I would expand, say, on the board game rule thing, right? Where it's like, it's in a sense, say, house rules, where it's like the rules include those that don't want to play are still, in a sense, attached to this game, but they don't have to, none of the, interactions of like how the game works necessarily, say, some political thing like that. It's got like the rules for how to run the games, like how to run for office or something. And it's like, no, I'm out. I don't believe in the state. I don't even want to play your game. Right? The rules basically state that everyone is still playing the game. You just don't have to participate. And the rules of the game state you, the player of the game, can't go and hit a non-player still. It's like a house rule where it's like anyone that enters my house doesn't have to play the games I watch or watch the shows I watch. But in the rule is they can separate themselves as far as they want, but I can't attack them. They can't attack me. They can't sell their rights. Also, like they can't sell themselves into slavery.
Yeah.
My rules kind of thing. Because it's not there in the sense of like objectivism or anarchy you have on your thumbnail, like self-ownership, which is something objectivists disagree with. They're like, you can't have a property up for yourself before property has been established in the first place. So in that sense, they're like, you don't have the ownership of yourself. The rule is you can't sell your own ownership. So it's like you come into my house, you don't have to play the exact game, but you're still written within the rules.
So you're saying, because I haven't really heard this.
It doesn't force anything on you. It just says, I can't do anything to you.
Even self-ownership?
Pardon?
You're saying that objectivists, because I've never heard this from other objectivists, that they don't believe in self-ownership. Like that, I own me. Like that, they believe that other people own you?
No. That's not the basis. There's no actual argument for the self-ownership. Because when he first created the self-ownership thing, it was just by eliminating 2 options he didn't like. But none of them are established on any actual principle. You just take it axiomatically, right?
Well, I mean, no, but I literally, like, there's nobody, and it's so far, I've never even seen science try to suggest that there's anyone that has the ability to control my arm or.
Yeah, but controlling your arm is not the same as owning your arm.
Who could claim ownership over my arm considering it's
But
attached?
the whole point of ownership is that it's a concept, a human concept. And it's a concept that we invented in order to establish that this is my stuff and this is your stuff. So we needed.
We haven't even got to the stuff yet. I'm talking about just me as a person. Like,
yeah, but the point being, conceptually, by definition, the same Webster Dictionary definition you like, property and ownership, like, it requires property rights in the first place. So self-ownership states, I have property rights because I have property rights because I have property rights.
No. Well, property rights are an extension of the fact that I own myself and the products.
That's my point. You can't say that you own yourself before you know what it means to own something. Like, what does it mean to own something when you start with that ownership is it's not based on anything.
What it means, I'm not sure how you've heard it described by anyone else, but for me, and the way I describe what self-ownership means, and what I've always understood it mean, is that no other human being gets any claim of ownership over me other than myself. So it's an admission that slavery is immoral, because if someone else can claim ownership,
is that you just take it axiomatically in libertarian. Libertarians just take it axiomatically.
Well, no, but it's a reality. Like, I do own myself. Nobody has the.
My point is that you don't own yourself, because owning is the wrong word. That words matter, and right, we're talking about like words clarifying thought, to clarify language, to clarify thinking. You need words to mean certain things.
But I've never heard anyone actually. You're the first, and once again, I'm just saying here, you're the first person I've ever that found that self-ownership was like anything other than the way I describe it, and everyone else accepts it pretty simply. For most people, it's a really, really simple concept.
You could punch it into YouTube: objectivism versus self-ownership. It's the one thing that all objectivists actually hit on, is that if you're built, like, this is part of epistemology. It's a philosophy that most libertarians just ignore, that epistemology is based on words. Words matter.
Yeah.
Well, to own something already presupposes property.
Well, yeah, because I am, like, who else could own me? Well, I mean, that's what would you? Okay, hey, how about this? What word would you use to describe that somebody and no other human beings on the planet should have any authority to claim ownership over me? What would you call that? I don't know.
I would call that life.
Life? But that's the thing. Look up life. Okay. Well, then this life, right? I'm in control, and nobody has any claim to own my life. Or actually, I guess so. Okay, put it in a sentence for me, man.
I would say that you can move your body based on your nature, but that is not the definition of ownership.
No, but you're just describing, what I could do, right? But what does it mean? What does it mean?
What you can do is not the same as owning.
What does it mean to be sovereign then? What does it mean to be sovereign?
Again, it's a concept that takes one thing that a lot of people do when they talk about philosophy is they come at it from the adult perspective. That like all of these words are already established in your head, and now you can just rearrange them. But how do these words get in your head in the first place? Over time as a child, right? By exposure and experience.
Yeah, but I'm more than willing to I'm saying here, wipe my mind blank of this of self-ownership, and I just need you to explain to me how you would explain to, like, let's say you had a kid, or you're doing or putting on a lecture somewhere. How do you explain to your audience, or anyone that's listening, to this stream, how do you explain to them that no other human being should claim that they can control you without your permission, or take anything from you that you produce or provide, or do anything to your body, your mind, or any other thing that represents you? How would you say that without saying self-ownership? That's all I'm saying. If you want to use a different word,
using, say, Ayn Rand's standing on a foot thing, you'd use selfishness. But like, it's all about the self, that the self is the thing that does the operating, does the action. Right. Now the self, it's like, in the same sense, does an animal own themselves?
Yeah.
So that means animals have the right to property then.
Of course. And you go out and watch there in the animal kingdom, you'll find out they damn well fight for it too. And they know it instinctively. Nobody has to even, well, it's basically, part of their experience as they grow up, and their parents, their grandparents, just like in human nature, every animal on this planet has a place that they define as their own. Now, other people or other animals try to infringe on it all the time, and they end up having a battle. Sometimes it's quite the conflict. Sometimes somebody dies or some animal dies, right? But yes, even in the animal kingdom, there's just like a forest. Each tree, by natural fact that seed fell to the ground and it sprouted in that ground, and that is the property, that space, that tree owns that space by definition, that's where it was produced and where it flourished and where it grew. So yeah, I think that's all consistent with not just nature, but even in the observable universe, right?
Yeah, I would think that's what you're doing, is in a sense conflating metaphysics with epistemology. That okay. Humans, what were you gonna say?
No, I'm just, I get what you're saying. I don't, so you said selfishness. So I'm just saying though, like, I'm asking you you're using one word, but I could never, if I put it this way, if I'm trying to learn from you, let's say, and not use self-ownership as a means to explain to other people that no other human being gets to claim any portion of ownership over me or anything I produce or my body or my mind, then I'm just saying, if you would want me to forget about how I understand what self-ownership means, and you want me to explain it to someone else going forward, can you at least tell me how you would do that?
Okay, well, let's break down ownership in a sense. That, like, you're saying that, like, because you can't control someone else's mind or body, that you can't own it, in a sense, right?
Well, no, but some people could technically, because you can use that technically, like if someone had the physical force, they could really come up, grab me, right, move my arm, right?
No,
but I mean,
I mean mentally. I mean, like, they can't mentally force you,
right,
to,
right.
They can't use their mind to make your mind do things.
Well, although that's another thing. Hey, with technology and all this stuff getting pretty crazy, it might even get to the point where they might. Who knows? All I'm saying is that nobody would ever have any authority to control me without my permission. Anything, not my mind, not my hands, my arms, my legs, nothing about me. Well, all self-ownership means, as far as I understand it, is that I am the only person on this planet that has the authority, the right, the moral or ethical position to, or just the physical right abilities is to do and control what's on my mind. Nobody should have any authority to arbitrarily prevent me from being able to control my own mind or my own arms or have my thought processes. I should be the one ultimately in control of that. That's really what self-ownership means. So I'm saying
that self-ownership is not defined as the ability to move one's body.
No.
Right.
Self-ownership.
So I'm saying the fact that one is able to move one's own body is not a reliable defense of why one owns them.
That's going to be just part of the equation. Like I say, there's all kinds of other aspects of it too. Not just the ability to move my body, but the ability to think, like I say, in my own way, and to do whatever, like to breathe. Right? Like if I want to breathe, I should be able to breathe, and nobody would have the ability to put their hand over my mouth and prevent me from breathing. So all the aspects.
The objectivist moral question is why is breathing good? Well, it's good for life.
Yeah.
Right? Because if life is the standard, anything that harms life is the bad, and anything that helps life is the good. And that's where an objectivist moral system comes from. What helps my life is the good, and that includes like not mistreating other people because they will mistreat me back. So I have to act rationally. So it's like, I have a value system of do things that give me pleasure, but be reasonable about it, because if I try to just achieve pure pleasure without thinking about other people, I'm just going to end up in jail or murdered for my actions, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you have that. What?
Oh, just when you get into stuff like that, and I hate to even do it, but that's the thing. When you get into stuff like that, it's like, because I don't like doing it, because it's I find it just wastes so much time. But it is one of those things where you get into the area where people can come up with, people like bondage. And so I get what you're saying. And just so you know that I won't use those kind of things again, because once again, I think it just drags these conversations out needlessly for really, you don't get any further. But that's the problem with what you were saying, like what is good for me, because even Ayn Rand accepted it, that it's not just what's good for you now or an hour from now, or
Yeah,
next,
it's long term.
right? There's the long term too. So I get you, but there's so many areas when you're talking about stuff like that where you get right down into the weeds and play this whole, oh, look, this is an example where, you know, not necessarily. So I get what you're saying, but rather than go down that road, which really, like I say, doesn't get us anywhere, all I really want to say is, what would you, like I say, if you were to explain to someone, because I'm like, right now you're doing it to me, but I'm not being able to form the ideas in my own mind because you're not setting it up in a way where I even understand what you're saying. Like, so if it's not self-ownership, then, like I say, walk me through how I would explain to someone that no other person gets to claim ownership over me, my body, or anything I produce. What would you said you called it life, and then you said, what was the other word you used? Sorry.
I'm not sure.
What was that other one? Not life. You said life first, but there was another word you used after that. But anyways, like I say, to me is how would I explain to anyone, like, because to tell someone that it's not right to be a slave or for anyone to claim ownership over people, like, that's why I use self-ownership. And when I do that, most people instinctively understand what I'm saying. So it seems to be conducive with people, like, and most people accept, well, of course nobody has any authority to control me, or because they understand the historical precedent of slavery, and it automatically resonates with them, with their mind, and they can think through on that and go in their mind, test all that stuff out. But what you're saying, I don't know where I go from here. So like I say, kind of lead me down that road of what like, oh, selfishness, or selfish, or something like that is the other word you use. But how would I use that, like, in the form of a sentence or in a paragraph or something, to describe to people what you're trying to explain to me so that I can better understand it?
I would say what I'm trying to explain to you is just the uses of certain words being used in different contexts. That words matter, especially to an objectivist,
For sure.
and that ownership and property come after things. So it's like, my example would be, think about an enclave of humans pre-language.
Mm-hmm.
None of them, in a sense, would have even the ability to say, I own this, or I own myself. They wouldn't say things like property. And what you were talking about is, there's a metaphysical reality to property. That, like, obviously, if you're going to be some, just ape living in the wild without language, you're still going to need water. You're still going to need food. Still got land that you need to, venture across.
Yep.
And that the point that those apes need to do is just survive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those early humans they need to still use their mind
Mm-hmm.
to find those things of value.
Mm-hmm.
But at a certain point, say one of them takes from another one, and you get like the Planet of the Apes Caesar just screaming no, because he's realized something,
Yeah.
like, they're like, hey, no, I worked for that and you're taking it from me.
Mm-hmm.
And that he established the property based on that he needs that property because that's how he needs to live. So his life was in danger, so property. So that, like, the property comes from life. And then when they start coming up with names for things, it's like, well, I want to live, so I need things to live. So we're going to call this thing I have a property, and that we're going to use another word that called ownership. And ownership describes whose property it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that we first came to the fact that morality, or like the property rights, came from life, and then we established the words property and ownership. So that axiomatically you can't start with, like, the apes didn't start with I am property, I can own things, I own myself, therefore property. It's the other way around.
Yeah, I am, I guess, if you don't want to use self-ownership, I am me. Like, this is me, right? So this is, I mean,
And
like I
that's
say,
why I say selfishness.
if you would want to use that instead and explain that to people, then I would suggest by all means do so. But what I'm saying is, I could explain the exact same thing that you're doing, actually much easier and much more efficient, by just using the term self-ownership. So if you want to do it the way you do it, I definitely go right ahead. But most people that I talk to, it's actually quite easy to teach them that self-ownership is just a normal part of being human.
But I would say it's easy to teach them that because it goes back to their life. They don't go back thinking about property. They go back to their values and their pleasures. So they're not thinking, it doesn't make sense to them because they have all of these words and understanding ownership and property rights and who controls what, and like who has mental abilities to control their body. It only goes back to the fact that they're like, yeah, well, I don't want other people to do stuff because I have values. My life has values. I have a life. So like the objectivists state that there's the axiom, is existence, consciousness.
Yep.
And that like then you move upwards to being able to even say I own myself. Whereas like the libertarian argument just comes in saying I own myself, and it misses the other things. And I feel like that's where a lot of libertarian, like all the different camps come from. You all have the same premise, but seeing as no one has any full agreement, there's ANCAPs, ANCOMs, laissez-fairs, so on and so forth.
Yeah, but do you know of anyone? Because I've never even, as a matter of fact, if I could find someone, I'd really like to have a conversation with them. But have you ever come across, whether they're objectivists, anarchists, ANCOMs, like you say, socialists? Have you ever come across anyone that actually don't believe in what you would describe as I am me, right? This selfishness, let's say, or selfish self-preservation, whatever you want to call it, or self-ownership, how I use the term, is I would suggest that all people accept that, right? I've never come across anyone yet that says no, that somebody else should claim ownership over me, or I don't know how I'd incorporate the word selfish into how would you use it if someone else is claiming that you are solely for them? What would you use to describe that?
Well, it's split it up into the different theories of values. The objective theory of value is mine, and that like there's one set of rules kind of thing, and it's derived from nature. There's the intrinsic theory of value, which basically says like the God should be the benefactor of everyone's labor. That like you give back to him. What it all comes down to is who gets the benefits of their productive efforts. And objectively, we define, like objectivists define it based on life, you should get it. Right. But intrinsic theory says, well, God created you, he should get it. And then there's the social theory of value, which says that like, well, the state basically created you, so you should give back to the state. They should benefit from your goods.
But you would suggest that the state or religion, like God, you would suggest that both of them are fictional constructs that actually aren't entrenched in anything that's actually testable or provable in terms of objective reason or logic, right?
Yeah, that's why I take the objective theory.
Well, yeah, so that to me, really, at the end of the day, like, and I get that if you want to keep this going, but I think we both actually agree here. I think we're just kind of getting caught up in the terminology, and I'm all for, like, if you want to use your own way. This is the thing. It's as a libertarian, a philosophical, I don't try to impose. Like, if you want to explain, and a matter of fact, if you can find a better way to explain to people to not believe they should subject themselves to other people because they have any pretense or claim of I don't know what, like I say, once again, I'm using the term ownership or slave or whatever you want to do to explain to people. I'm just saying, for me, based on my real world experiences so far, that most people I've ever talked to, it works out quite well. And whether it's because of the environmental factors, their past, their history, their family, whatever, I'm just saying, for the people that are alive today, if I'm going to try to explain some of these theories or principles that underlines it, the premises for my ideas, or not just my ideas, but the ideas I hold to be objectively true and consistent and ethical in nature, is that I think it's really easy to say that no other human being has any ability to claim ownership over you. Now, like I say, if you want to explain that in a different manner, that's fine. But I don't think we actually disagree, because you're admitting the same thing. It's just you want to use a different way of explaining the same thing. And I'm cool with that. You can explain it. If you can explain it, especially if objectivists think more along like what you are thinking, and they, have a different mindset, and the words that you use or maybe resonate with them by the way you talk, then I would say, yeah, probably use your language to, if you're getting the same message across, and people that have a particular kind of mindset or way of thinking that's more conducive with the way you're explaining to them, I would say then, yeah, go for it. Like, say it however you want to. I'm just telling you, for me, and it might be just because, like I say, me as the individual, you know, my education or lack thereof, but I don't, what you've said so far, it doesn't sound nearly as simple. It's almost like trying to use, for me anyways, not saying that that's the case, but it almost sounds like a long way of, it's like trying to use the Ptolemaic system to explain the solar system, when it's like, actually, no, I wouldn't be able to use that for an example, because that was actually wrong, incorrect. So no, that's not a good example. But I don't know, like I say, I can't think of an example to use right now, but if it works for you, then by all means you use that. But I'm just saying, for me, what you've explained to me so far, I kind of get a little bit of the nuance of what you're saying. But if you were trying to explain to me and I was someone that wasn't as knowledgeable I am today in terms of listening to some of the objectives who've talked in the past, I'd be like, what the fuck is this guy talking? So I'm just saying, but when I tell people, like I say, and it doesn't matter if they're conservative, liberal, libertarian, people that are Christians, atheists, every time I've talked to people from all walks of life, regardless of the background, when I talk about self-ownership, they seem to instinctively understand that. And like I say, you're saying, it might be as a tribute because of the way of Western style education or the past culture and history and the way things have been taught throughout not just the education system, but by passed down knowledge. Either way, but to me, once again, if it works and it's explaining the same thing, then go for it, right? If you can use the metric system to figure out the yardage or whatever you want, go ahead. I'll use the old SAE, the standard system, and we'll both get the same outcome, hopefully, anyways, and then that's fine, right? Sorry.
I think the issue, like, that's a really good analogy, but I think that, like, in one sense, it's objectivists say using the metric system, libertarians want to using like the SI, and then like one of the big issues I think that at the very end of the day is objectivists are like, well, your numbers are off of, like, they're different than ours, and it's like you guys are like, yeah, but we're approximately the same, and objectivists are like, no, we want like actually the exact same, and trying to convert between those things, we get a little bit of error, and you're like, oh, the error is okay.
But I don't see the error though, because we both got to the same determination that
the error between the two things, I would say, would be the small little details. Like, I agree with you that if talking to someone, and we're both Canadian, so talking to another Canadian, you're gonna get they're like, obviously you hit these points, and they go, yeah, well, I would want this because it would protect my family. I want this because it's good for me. I want this, like. And no one should have authority over me because I want that control. And that in that approximation, you see, they're kind of on my side. Whereas then if you keep talking to that same Canadian for longer than 10 minutes, and like within 10 minutes, they're going to say something that shows that they also want to be a slave. Like, I've talked to just so many Canadians that are like,
not mine.
What?
Yeah, but that's a failure in their logic, not mine.
No, of course. But I'm just saying that in talking to some, like, and the objectivist point being, just because someone agrees with you that you shouldn't be owned, they're those same people without that metaphysics, without that epistemology, without that ethical base. If you just started politics and go, hey, should we be owned or free? They'd go, free. But how you then implement that, objectivists are concerned with. And so it's like, you talk to that same Canadian, they're like, yeah, I want to be free. But also there should be a law against people who drive too fast. There should be a law against people who smoke in their house. It's like you talk to one group of people and they're like, yeah, I want to be free. But also government should step in.
Yeah, but see, that's where the logic fails. And that's why I like libertarianism, because the NAP. So in addition to the self-ownership and property rights, the other aspect of it, if someone were to say that, is like, well, the thing that brings you full circle with the libertarian philosophy and principle is the NAP. So you have to test that as the hypothesis as well. So you would say, well, I don't like people speeding, or I think people was okay. Well, is someone speeding? Is that automatic mean that there's going to be a victim involved? No, because actually a lot of people speed all the time. Matter of fact, I would say most days, most people speed, and most people never get in an accident. Now, there's a small percentage of people who speed up, but there's also ones that drive too slow. There's also ones that drive the exact speed limit, but maybe they've reached down to grab something off the floor. So there's all kinds of areas where people will say, but what about, but once again, how you figure that out easily and how it's served me so well. Now, I have learned about the NAP in terms of libertarian philosophy, much later in life, but my Christian background kind of, and especially because it's mostly New Testament stuff, not the Old Testament stuff, kind of already gave me that basis, right? There's actually some of the meta stories and narratives contained within the Bible, and even some of the Ten Commandments that basically kind of allude and kind of suggest the same kind of thing as non-aggression principle. Don't hit, don't steal. Very, very simple premises. And once again, you can see how that is easily where most people accept and adopt it. There's always going to be exceptions that people don't want to adhere to those principles or those rules. And maybe they don't want to adhere to them at certain times, because if they go against those rules, they might benefit themselves or someone else at someone else's expense, but they can't universalize that. They might be able to make a valid excuse or a reason why, like I'll use the example too, where the person that is stuck up in the tree and jumps into the person's house through the window and smashes the window, right? Sure, they could make and of course I would suggest that even though that person may have infringed on the NAP by breaking that person's window, this is the area where once again and this is the part where objectivists and libertarians, this is the problem with both. This is where I'm going to give us both a good tongue lashing. No, I'm just kidding though. But in a way, because these things with negative rights, which are mostly what objectivist philosophies and libertarian philosophy is built upon, it's great. It tells you what you shouldn't do, but it's not the best in terms of guiding people in terms of morality and what they should do. So there's the selfish self-interest. That's great. And I like I say, I agree with objectivists in so many areas, and that makes a lot of sense. But you're always going to find some areas in your life where that selfishness or sole self-interest might not necessarily be conducive for in every subject or any situation or incident. So that's where you need something else as the basis. Now, for me, I had the meta stories and the narratives that was espoused to me by religious people in my community and my family. And those are things that I think help me and kind of separate me a little bit more from people that are just staunch, come from it as an atheist libertarian or an atheist objectivist, because I see that there's very amazing amount of critical thinking skills, amazing objective standards, but there's some areas where objectivists and libertarians leave out where there's some nuance to this. And this is the hard part, because it's because of that nuance that makes it impossible almost for us to figure this stuff out, which is why we're basically 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours here, and we're really not a whole lot closer to figuring this out. I'm glad we're trying it though. That's the thing. I'm glad we're both doing these things, but this is just showing us it's really, really hard to do all this stuff, because we're accepting that people are fallible. People have different environmental factors. They have their own personal subjective and anecdotal experiences. There's just so many areas, and there's so many examples in life where you can say that this should be right and this should be legit. This should be a principled approach. This should be moral. This should be ethical. And once again, there's a lot of areas that we definitely need to expand upon. And like I say, we still are maturing as a species. But so far, the only thing that I can figure out as a person that's alive today is the non-aggression principle seems like a really, really good area at least to start from, because then you don't have to come at it from like a religious background, and you can use that in the secular realm. But you do need something to follow up and give people some good guiding principles. And how you bring that about, like I say, objectivists can do it their way. And if it proves, let's say, if you live in a community that's mostly objectivist, and it shows that the objectivists, like that community, is functioning and they get along, they're interacting with each other much better than other people, whether it's a libertarian community, an atheist community, or an anarchist, whatever works best for most people, as long as we're not forcing stuff on each other, then to me, it's like that's a better approach than trying to create a one-size-fits-all approach. Other than, like I say, when we interact, what people do in the privacy of their own home, or in the privacy in their own or in their own little communities. Like I say, people that want to do all kinds of things that off the top of my head, I'd be like, damn, that's some crazy ass shit. But hey, if y'all want to do it, you go ahead and do it. The only thing, like I say, is when you're dealing with other human beings, just keep these very small rules, and as part of your principles is don't hit, don't steal, don't rape, if we can at least have those bases for our social and economic interactions, then the rest of it, I think we can figure out in time, just like how natural law, right? We do take a couple steps back, a step back, but we do kind of advance, slightly, right, as humans. So I'm saying there's a lot of work that's still got to be done, and you or I are not going to figure it out in this stream as much as I wish we could, right? But I just like the fact that we're both willing to engage and talk about these things, because really that's what needs to happen, is more and more people. And matter of fact, not just of objectivists and libertarians, but yeah, where's all the socialists? Where's the communists? Where's the ANCOMs? All, come on, let's have a chat here, folks, because like I say, I guarantee for the most part, I think most of us, no matter what our background, no matter what ideology or philosophy that we want to adhere to, I think we can all find ways that would agree. As a matter of fact, I believe that, Ryan, if me and you were neighbors, I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% certain that we would figure out ways to be neighbors with each other. And you could do your objectivist thing, I could do my libertarian thing. And as long as, like I say, we agree that when we're dealing with each other, that I don't hit you preemptively, you don't, I think we could figure that stuff out. And then the rest of it would be it's just like, what's that when you're doing stuff on the fly as a comedian? That term.
Yeah.
But anyways, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyways, that's what I'm saying. And we'll have to try to figure that stuff out, in real time on the fly. But like I say, I really do think, now I'm going to give you all kinds of time right now if you want to say a bunch of things, because I think unless there's something that you feel that we have missed out on, I think we've kind of hammered this stuff home pretty good here. But what do you think?
Yeah, well, I got one thing to hit, because you gave an example that was, I think, really great for the opposite of what we talked about earlier. When you talk about stealing your bike getting stolen, what I said was, what the action you took was, say, legal, but that action itself was immoral, right? Because I was like that you didn't know what you were that you could possibly be risking your life, and it's like, so that's where I specified that. Then you flipped it. You got a guy stuck in a tree, and the only way to get out of the tree is to jump through someone's window. It's like, in that case, I would say jumping through the window at initial burst is illegal, but the act itself was moral, because it was the only way to save yourself. So our distinction is between a moral, whether morality is based on you or based on your interactions. One of the things you also said was one size fits all, and that's how libertarian you see the system as doing one size fits all. But I would say, what is it fitting? Because I would say what it's fitting is those values. We establish together, don't hit, don't kill, don't steal, don't, right? But what does each one of those things have as its basic, what is the genus of all of those different ideas? They all have a different differentia in their definitions. They all have a different thing that makes them a different thing. Hitting's different than killing versus thieving. But what do they all have in common? They all have in common is the loss of value. And that one size fits all is, did this act harm someone's values? And that at first jumping through the window is illegal. He takes you to court and you go, look, that was the only way to save my life. The judge can go, that one size fits all is, he was he was in a sense defending his life from death. So I'm not going to punish him for jumping through your window. You guys can try to take it to civil court and work out how he's going to pay you, but his act was not criminal. He was doing it morally. Right. And that one size fits all is, once you take that system to court, or once you have that one system, the whole one system's point is one size fits all, and that one size that you're fitting is people's lives. So it's not you don't want to try to one size fits all people's preferences. That would definitely be totalitarian. But if you make it one size fits all, and the one thing you're trying to fit is that human beings have a certain nature, let's just try to establish that nature, then it's that all objectivists are really saying is, let's think about that in that light. But I would say that if we were neighbors, we'd 100% just agree that based on how we are, we could go about our days without even interacting, in a sense that we're going to end up feuding or anything. Right. But that when I go into my home, it's all about studying philosophy, and when you go into yours, maybe it's something different. And that the major fundamental difference is how we approach it, and then how we approach it gives us a different result. And objectivists basically just say, at least from say the ANCAP point of view, the objectivists think that they have it figured out, and here's how they want to implement it. where say libertarians are not so sure that objectivists have figured it out yet.
Well, yeah, and great points you made there. The one thing I do take that to me it's a little, I don't know, for me it still doesn't sound right. But when you're saying about when I got the bike back, it was, what'd you say? It's legal but immoral.
Yeah.
I'm having a real hard time with that one.
If morality is based on life, risking your life is a bad. It's like it might not, at the end of the day, all things considered, it might have still been morally, worth it.
Yeah, but
But
that doesn't work.
You don't know what you're getting yourself into. How can you, like, the whole point of one of the things of morality is that you want to be certain that what you're doing is going to be good for you. If you can't be certain of the situation you're walking into, then how do you know you're not going to end up dead doing so?
Well, here's the issue that I would take with that. And like I say, just bouncing this off of here, but sometimes doing things that has the potential that is threatening to you, and there is a potential for danger, is literally the only reason why we live today in a world with all these modern technologies, amenities, right? Like basically most things that humans did in the past to get us to this point were dangerous, and we're not only a potential threat, but I would say that, a substantial amount of really good people died over the course of history. Think about some of them fighter jet pilots that were testing for the, space program, some of these insane things just to see how many G's the body could take. And, there was crashes. So they put themselves, or the person today even that's got to climb up that 1,000-foot tower, right, to change the light bulb so that the plane doesn't run into it. I would suggest. Sorry, what?
Still comes down to values, though. Like those people, they valued doing that job over it. And if they still voluntarily, like what we both agree on is that it's good that they got the choice to voluntarily decide what their values are.
Well, values, but I'm talking though in relation to my bike. So someone stole mine. It was mine. They had no legal claim of possession or ownership over it. So taking it back. Now I could understand if you would say I was immoral by I go there, I go get my bike back. And even though there was no physical confrontation, the guy basically put his hands up, said, okay, sorry, man, I didn't know, or whatever. Like say, no one was harmed. There was no damage to anybody's property. I just basically ended up getting my ATV back. So I would say, actually, I think that situation was handled quite morally. And the fact, even the sheer fact that this person, although I kind of suspected at the time that the person just had possession of it, I don't think it was the person that actually stole it. So I didn't have this animosity for the person to begin with, because, people buy stolen goods and aren't aware of that. Although the fact that the serial number was buffed out of it and they didn't have registration probably should have given them a good clue, right? But I think actually that situation was handled, I think, pretty darn good. And I don't know how you could come up with it being immoral, because there was no escalation or any violence.
It was just about the potential risk. So it's like whether it's like, it depends on really how much.
But you just admitted that if I chose to take on a risk in other endeavors in life, that's okay. But I'm still putting myself
like it's a life or death risk, not just it's not that taking a risk is bad. It's like if I'm going to try to get this job and I might not get it, and the risk is, that I'm going to have to keep looking for jobs, take the risk. But the point, that still that taking that risk is moral. And as you're saying earlier, like this is where we just get into the weeds. Where it's like the morality, because morality, it's objective that there is a life and that life can end. If doing this thing can cause that life to end, I call it immoral.
But would you agree that climbing 1,000-foot ladder to change a bulb, or those guys that built the skyscrapers? You ever watch some of those movies or the old documentaries with the guys building the skyscrapers down in New York City, walking on those steel beams like way the hell up in the air, firing hot rivets at each other? I'm pretty sure most of those guys didn't have a death wish. They generally felt secure in their competence and their skills.
Yeah, you said it. They felt secure.
Did die. Some of them did fall to their death and died. So are you saying they were immoral because, maybe when they were doing what they did, there was a spot that they didn't notice that was wet, or the big gust of wind come along and knocked them off, and it was something that was outside their control, and there's no way they could have known that. I don't know. That just seems like a strange way to go about that, because then you could basically turn a whole lot of things what people do that are dangerous into immoral acts. And I think a lot of the times these things are really, really good things and benevolent and actually vital for humans to flourish.
No, and I would agree, but that is the whole issue of like really in getting in the weeds of like, to this person was, like if you absolutely were terrified of heights, you were not secure in that you were going to survive, you thought you can't even pick up the steel beams to move them around anyways. Like in that sense, like I'm in no condition to build skyscrapers. And so taking in context my life and my body, I would die definitely. So it would be immoral for me to do it. But if someone is secure that they can do it, then go ahead and do it. Like you're producing value and you think it's a value. You're like, oh, I want to do this because it helps my family because I get paid. It helps society because we built this cool building. Like as an objectivist, I'm definitely not against skyscrapers. It's like,
I'm not. But even what you said, you would suggested that if the person is competent and understands and has the skill. Well, I would suggest to you that my son, I was completely, and I knew him because he's my son. I knew he had the skills, the competence, and the ability, and that he wasn't going to try to escalate or cause any violence needlessly or necessary, because I was the one that raised him. So he's got the same kind of principles I do. Actually, we do podcasts together. He's a libertarian or an anarchist himself. So I would suggest that actually, I made that calculation. So would you still suggest that it's immoral? Or it was immoral?
I'm going to assume that you took in the full calculation, and I'm not going to question you and say that what you did, you took in the, then that say the action was moral. That like, but I also like to just include in the fact that like, what if it went the other way? What if you had lost lives doing so? And it's like, could then you not then turn around and take my side that like, obviously it was immoral. So it's like the fact that there was that potential going into it, that something you value could be lost.
Do you see?
The question is, do you want to risk that?
But do you see what you're doing there? You're actually lending more credibility to my hypothesis that objectivists constantly use that fear mechanism. And I get it. And I'm not saying it's bad of you to do it, but I have noticed that that's a big, big, big pattern for people that identify as objectivists. It's still an area of their mind. And not saying that's wrong. It's probably good. It's probably good. And like I say, I'm
assessment.
What?
I would call it risk assessment.
Right. Okay. No, but either way you want to call it. And like I say, I'm not saying this to denigrate or insult you. I'm just saying it's just something that I've observed over the years where I've had interactions with other objectivists or even listeners. And I think that's what it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. I sure as heck wouldn't want to try to convince you to be exactly like me and think exactly like me. I love the fact that we have the diversity of our minds and our perspectives and our opinions on things, so that you can help me to build up some of the things that maybe I'm missing out in my knowledge, and maybe I can do the same for you. That's one area that I'm really thankful for. And I know it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, because but if everyone's got all these different things, well, how are we ever going to create this peaceful or free society? Because there's just too many people with too many ideas, too many different subjective preferences or opinions. But that's the thing with the human experience, is I have to accept, you have to accept, the rest of us in this whole planet have to accept that we're living on a big old planet that's floating through space 1,000 miles an hour, and there's always going to be a potential. As a matter of fact, I've seen people, and I get really sad and almost disturbed when I hear people that have gone through their whole life and they've been so protective of everything. They've done everything they think that's been preemptive in terms of protect themselves. And then what happens? Me, I'm out there driving like a freaking madman, doing wheelies at 80 miles an hour, right? And these people have done everything right in their life in terms of making sure they protected themselves. They got the fucking foam on all their corners of it, all their sharp edges on their front. No, I'm kind of exaggerating there, but then still bad stuff is going to happen. So that's the thing that I'm understanding, like, the fear is important. Fear is very important. You got to have fear. That's part of the human experience. It's part of our emotion. That's how our composition, that's how we're made up. So fear can be very, very important, and it's a good way to guide us. I just think, once again, it comes down to balancing that out. And again, I wouldn't even be able to tell you to balance it out. In this situation, it should be exactly this. I don't know. I can't suggest that I know how everyone should react or deal with every situation or circumstance they ever encounter. Like I say, I get back to the basics in terms of the philosophy of libertarianism, of liberty, is the self ownership, property rights, and non-aggression principle. If you have those three core fundamentals, and I think all objectivists pretty much have them baked in the philosophy, even though you want to use different words, I'm totally cool with that. But I think those things alone are what's helping us achieve a great amount of things, not just in terms of economic success or technological advancements or personal prosperity or the selfish desires and wants and needs that we all try to fulfill every day. There's a tremendous amount of things that we humans are always going to try to undertake for multitudes of reasons, but it's those underlying fundamentals that I've always seen in my personal life, my family life, community, or even on a grander scale, is that if we at least adhere to those fundamental principles of, like I say, self-ownership, property rights, and the NAP, most of the times, or at least the overwhelming majority of the times, you're going to go through life, fairly well, and you're going to live in a community of most people that will respect you, because if you're not imposing yourself on them, like you were kind of alluding to earlier, doesn't mean that no one else is going to want to, but at least it lowers the bar, or it lowers the potential for that to happen. So, like I say, I think the big thing with objectivists is, like I say, they leave that little bit of air in their mind. Not going to say that it's something that I want to beat out of you or anyone else. Go ahead, do your thing, because, like I say, that helps you think about things in a slightly different manner. It might give you something where you'll be able to tweak even something that I've said in the past, and even today, you've given me some stuff to think about. But I really do think that it's the fear that leaves that little bit for objectivists to leave that vacant space open for the state. And that's the state at the end of the day is kind of what this whole conversation was about, anarchy versus the state. It's the state that I see to be the most detriment to most people, right? The criminals, I fully expect criminals will exist, but the state is the biggest threat. And the thing that I fear is the belief in the state is what allows a lot of really, really good people to be harmed needlessly, right? So that's I guess where I'm coming with this.
Yeah, I would just say then to wrap that up with you that libertarians, perhaps from my point of view or an objective point of view, is that they're too fearless. They're like, you know what? Let's just throw it to throw caution to the wind. Let's see what happens.
Could be,
it's
man.
The two conversations I've had, like the one with you and the other one with Tim Moen. And Tim, he's a firefighter already. He's already jumping into this. He jumps right into the fire, and I would think that you would also jump into the fire. I don't know many activists that would. And I think maybe there is a fundamental difference in personality that drives that line.
I think you're absolutely. I think you actually just nailed it right there, 100%. And this is a great way to tie this up, because I think you actually just 100% nailed it. I think that's what it is. And you know what? I wouldn't want to live in a world filled with just me and Tim Moens, right? If the whole world was filled with a bunch of me and Tim Moens, yeah, it probably wouldn't be the best place. So I'm really glad that there are objectivists or all kinds of other people. That's the beautiful thing about the human experience and the human race, is we are quite diverse. Like I say, the only thing that I require at the end of the day from any other of my fellow human beings, no matter how they identify politically, ideologically, or philosophically, is can we just stick to some damn finite rules that I think will be beneficial to every single one of us and will help us to advance our species going forward, so that we don't end up being having to move to all these different. I'm all for exploring space, but not because we've destroyed our planet, because we've allowed the people that use mysticism or the state or the belief in authority to completely destroy what so many of us and the people in the past have built up over time. Because I don't want to tear anything down. Like I said, even early on, I'm not looking for tearing down the state. All I'm saying is there's better ways to do things. And if people like you or I can help expand people's minds to the point where they're thinking about these issues more critically, if you're the one, if you bring more and more people to, objectivism and the minarchist state or the night watchman state, I'm right there with you, man. I'm telling you. And the only time we'll ever disagree, I'm on that path walking down it with you. When we get to that last little 5% where we're disagreeing on the role of the state, then, I think we'll be fine. I'd be like, here you go. Shake your hand. Good for you, Ryan. We've already accomplished so much that we should be very happy that we've got that point. The problem, I think you'll recognize that we're the least of the problem, man. We are the least of the problem. Objectivists, I'm not worried about objectivists fucking me over. Right? I'm not worried about libertarians per se trying to take over and rule over my life. It's the statists, man. And those are the ones, because they have this profound belief in a mystical entity that's given power to do things that they should never be allowed to do. And that's the biggest concern and fear I have. So I do have fear too, but that's where my fear rests and resides.
Yeah, I would say, if objectivists are taking that road with libertarians, that libertarians just need to be like alert that objectivists are going to be complaining the entire trip.
It's all good. It's all good. Like I say, well, that make the journey. I mean, whether they're complaining or not, but I assure you, it won't be a boring ride, right? so I'm fine with that. But anyways, like I say, really appreciate you coming on and having this chat with me, Ryan. And before we tie this up entirely, if you want, not just finish up and say anything else you want to say, but if you want to mention to people any websites, or I know it's your YouTube channel. Was it where'd that go? University. So I'll definitely put that link. But is there anything else that you would like to share with anyone, or any links?
No, I think we wrap it up, and I can go get some lunch or something.
Right on. Sounds good. Well, like I say, and sorry to all the folks in the chat. I seen the chat was just scrolling on by there early. I was really happy to see there was actually quite a bit of people in there. I noticed a little bit late, but you folks probably realize when I'm having a conversation with a person, I like to be actively engaged and not distracting my attention, so that but I did notice that I got a donation, and thank you very much for that donation. And I really appreciate it. I'll mention that actually after I let Ryan go, and maybe I'll get to talking with a few of the folks in the chat there. But like I say, really appreciate it, Ryan. And if you ever want to come on and have a conversation with me again, or if you got anyone else that's, even from the objectivist camp that wants to talk about some of these things as well, I think we covered it pretty well, actually. But if there's other people that want to test their own knowledge or their thoughts against someone, like I say, I'm here. And as long as you come at it with me with good intentions, which obviously you did, and you're not just here trying to play games or trying to play a little brinksmanship or one-upman, then I'm totally on board with having that. And I'm even willing to eat some humble pie from time to time, which I've had to do in the past. That's the only thing that's ever developed my mind to think better about things or more objective about things, is having to destroy some of that old shit that was in there in the past. So I'm all for it. And as long as other people are willing to do the same, that's really all that we need at the end of the day. And I think we'll get there eventually, but it's going to take a few more than us. Right.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
No problem, Ryan. You have yourself a good one. Okay, buddy.
Yeah, you too.
Take it easy. Okay. All right. So I just want to go back up and check who it was that donated there, because I feel bad that I didn't get a chance to mention that person. I usually would stop the chat and actually respond usually, but like I say, oh shoot, I can't even go up far enough. Anyways, I'll look for it. After I tie up this stream, I'll have to go back and wait till it's processed, and then I'll look for whoever there was that donated. I think it was $5, said buy myself a coffee. Darn, I should have looked to see the name. It was something that was right there. I should have maybe taken the time, but I think Ryan was actually in the middle of a thought, so I didn't want to disrupt them. Anyways, but like I say, thanks for all you folks that joined the stream. I see there's lots of people in there, and I'm glad to see that you're interested in this conversation, because really at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's about having conversations, and every time I've had it, I've been pleasantly surprised to see that, yeah, it's as long as you have good intentions, really, we can figure this stuff out. It's not as difficult as some people make it seem, especially the statists and the propagandists and the sophists among us. They will constantly try to make things as difficult as humanly possible to keep people confused, confounded, and fighting and divided, right? Because that divide and conquer, that works real well. But anyways, let me just see if I can, before I tie it up, maybe give it a few minutes and read through some of the comments here. Smash that like button below, please. Yeah, thank you very much. Truth Sharing Mirror. Really, really appreciate that. What do we got? Reality Prevails. Matt Douglas. Thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate that. Yeah. Chicken or egg? What's the question? Yeah, good one, right? The universe is made for human. Hey, what's going on, Rika? Moral relativists don't understand morality. Right on. Dave, you're talking natural law. Natural law is really important. It's something that's just built up over time by just people, using those kinds of objective standards and testing them on a regular basis to see how conducive they are to genuine freedom, prosperity, and all that stuff in society. And it's an ongoing process, right? Obviously. What else we got here? Manifest reality or not? Thank you, Dave Dismantled, for commenting there. Another one. Did your actions cause harm? Yes. Immoral. Did your actions cause harm? Yes. Immoral. Wrong and incorrect. Did your actions not cause harm? Moral. Right and correct. Potential and intent. Me. Okay. Yeah. Right on there, Dave. I get what you're saying there. Thank you very much. There is no corruption in natural law. Well, no, because it's natural. It's not top down. It's not imposed or by a coercive entity, right? So you're right there. True, because they're designed to be corrupt. All governments end in corruption. Exactly. That's the thing. That's the problem with the state. It allows people to do things that none of the rest of us in society. So just like that 4 questions, I didn't get it out as smooth or as seamless as I was hoping to, but I think most of you have already heard me in the past with that thing. You can't delegate a right or authority onto other people that you don't possess yourself. That's magical thinking. That's wishful thinking. That's creative mysticism, right? And it's been proven many times before to be detrimental. But like I say, I definitely agree with objectivists in so many ways that I don't perceive as objectivists as being enemies in any way. I perceive as objectivists as fellow travelers, and that we're just, and as Ryan even alluded to, maybe we need each other, right? It seems like we probably do, to kind of help us each other in balancing things out, and not just balancing ideas, but keeping society properly balanced as well. Life is so scary. Yeah, boo. Wait till Halloween comes around, Rika. You want to see scary? Going to be a lot of masks this year. No, it won't even be scary masks. This is going to be the lamest. No, I hope not. Actually, I hope people just say, nah, we're going to have a real Halloween. I'm ready for it. I'll definitely be doing a Halloween night special. By the way, yeah, I'll be doing, I don't even know what day it is, right? So, but yeah, it's that night. So yeah, I'll be doing a Halloween special. And my wife's always usually really good. We'll get something set up here. Maybe I'll have some spooky lights and some background. Anyways, we'll see. I'm looking forward. I love Halloween. It's one of those great holidays. I love lots of holidays. Hey, holidays are great. Anyways, let's see what we got here. I mean, I'm just looking for different people who comment. I'm going to skip some of them. Depends how you look at it, Ryan. Okay, Anthony Armada. Official blasphemy. Oh, thanks for joining the stream, by the way, Anthony. Appreciate that. Official blasphemy. Flog the dead horse to the bone. Sorry. I know. Sorry. I really apologize. But it's really important for me when I have these conversations with people so that they understand where I'm coming from. And I know I do have a tendency to repeat myself a lot, but it's because I want it to be, I find it very important to make sure that it's clear and concise what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I know I definitely got to get better at that. You're not the first person to say that I've repeated myself a few too many times. Trust me on that one. What else we got here? Matt Dugas, words are defined according to context, not Webster's. Oh, that's true. Words are a man, God, and family speak in heart and mind, and best of all thought. Well, that's that. I would say that's even true to a certain degree, but you have to have context, yes, but how do we understand that context? Because they're taught to us in a proper, like it's, at the very least, I would suggest that, Matt, you agree that we don't get to rewrite or make these words or terms to mean anything we want, right? I agree with you on the context, which is why verb, noun, right, is an adjective. All those things matter, which is why there's usually multiple meanings. But like I say, those multiple meanings are there for a reason. And that did actually come by way as the same thing in terms of context. That's why there's multiple meanings in the dictionary. But I get what you're saying. I really do. Trust me. We're kind of in agreement. Maybe seem like not so on the surface, but if you dig down to it, we definitely agree. Dave Dismantled, maternal sovereign consciousness, having an experience in the physical world. I am not a slave and have no fear of ending this physical existence. Right on, Dave. Anyways, let me scroll back up here, like I say, see if there's anyone I've missed. No, I think it's pretty much the same, folks. Oh, Shane Levesque here. Yes, Rika, to use a Star Wars metaphor, legitimate to exist right there. Right on. Hey, Ann and Steve, what's going on? How you doing? Is what we need. I kind of missed that top part. Oh, Venus Project. No, I don't know. The big time central planners there. I'm not a big fan of what's his name? What's his name? Oh, what is his name? Yeah, I know who you're talking about, the Venus Project guy. Sounds a little bit too much one of those central planned utopians, kind of like Orwell or Huxley talked about, right? Well, I guess they're a little bit different there, but depending on if you're talking about Brave New World or 1984. But I don't know. Like I say, it sounds good, but a technocracy is almost what it sounds like when you describe in the Venus Project. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of the technocracy, although not to suggest that we might end up there anyways. Boy, it's certainly seeming that way. Stephen or Shane Levesque, I have known theistic satanists or left-hand path occultists who have actively said to me they choose to do evil. Yeah, there's definitely some. I I have actually okay. There's definitely some people that got some pretty fucked up minds. They're pretty evil. That's for sure. I would agree with you there. Again, he goes back to the belief anarchy is something to be established. It's something to be recognized as objective, not something to be. Yeah, that's true. The Shreen. Actually, that I would agree with you 100% there. Oh yeah, the zeitgeist movement. What was that guy's name again? And the addendum. Oh shoot, I got to remember some of these. That's so many years ago. Holy crap. Peter Joseph, right? Is it Peter Joseph? Yeah, I think it's Peter Joseph. He's another one of those and they have some decent ideas. Like even half the time when you're listening to some of the stuff where they're describing the ills of the world, I was like, yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I'm totally with you there. And I even, like I say, for the zeitgeist guy and others, like I'm with you for the most part, but it's like, then you get to areas where you're sounding a whole lot like a central planner or a collectivist yourself. And if that's the case, maybe I'm not going to trust you as much as I originally did, right? Maybe I have good intentions, maybe not. But once again, I just don't think that anybody should have any pretense or even want to be the central planners or the puppet master of the world. That's the kind of person that has that mindset. I'm already a little bit apprehensive with the person that has the mindset that, hey, I've got it all figured out. Just give me all the power and I'll be able to manage this, right? It's like, not necessarily. I'm not quite that trusting, right? Sorry. No thanks. Anyways, okay, so I'll tie it up because I'm pretty much at 3 hours. But like I say, thanks for all you folks that joined up. And like I say, it was a great conversation. And Ryan was very respectful young man. Actually, he does look like a very young man, but a man that young that's already that wise and astute and thinking about these things and trying to delve and dip his toes in the water of this stuff. Hey, that's a very, very positive sign for me. And like I say, kudos to him for taking the time out to have this conversation with me today and being so respectful. Like I say, I'll gladly bring him on again at some point in time in the future. And actually, one more thing before I go, we're going to be having a discussion. Actually, it's going to be a good one. We're going to be a few of them. I got 3 people that are actually interested so far. And this one's going to be, if you don't think I cover a few contentious issues, well, nothing's off the table. There is no third rail when you're talking to me. I'll talk about anything at all. Because really, it's just talk at the end of the day. We're just talking, folks. We're just discussing concepts, ideas, and all these things. So anyways, Patrick. The original person that had posted was Thomas Anderson. So on a Facebook page post by Thomas Anderson, I was on, Canadian Libertarian. So I'm also on Canadian Libertarians with an S on the end. And I do contribute there, not nearly as much on my own personal page, Canadian Libertarian on Facebook. But if you go to Canadian Libertarians with an S, and it's a Facebook page, it was a post by Thomas Anderson that was wanting to discuss libertarians and the divide that you see all the time in terms of abortion, right? And that's a big contentious issue, because that's the thing. If you believe that life starts at the moment of conception, then, obviously the NAP suggests that, well, abortion is completely illegitimate, right? But there are people who say, yeah, but the woman, and especially let's say she was raped, right? And someone imposed themselves on her and forced her to be pregnant. Well, what about that? Doesn't she have self-ownership of her body? Shouldn't her rights be respected too? She's a sovereign being as well. So there's lots of nuance that has to be brought to the table when you're discussing a topic such as abortion. And actually, abortion is going to be a topic I expect going forward is going to be playing a big role in Western society, I think, because of the potential for Roe versus Wade to be revisited at some point in time based on how things are being talked or bandied about down in the U.S. So this is a topic, like I say, I'm really interested in having a discussion. And it seems like the kind of people that's going to be actively engaged in it are not just going to be idiots that are, insulting each other. They're going to be people that are going to be offering some really nuanced and important information and perspectives as it pertains to the abortion issue. So like I say, this is Thomas Anderson. Now, we've yet to set up a date because I have to coordinate this with 3 other people. So it's Thomas Anderson that was the originator of the post. And shout out to him if he gets a chance to watch this. And it was Patrick Carroll and John Hicks. They both said in this that they want to join in the conversation as well. So it'll be all 4 of us. Thomas, Patrick, John, and myself will be having a conversation. Like I say, we're still trying to iron the details of when we're going to have this because, it's going to be a scheduling thing because you got 4 people who have to come together and figure out, what time is going to be conducive for that. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that because, like I say, I'm I'm 100% certain, without even knowing how the conversation is going to unfold, that you're at the very least you're going to hear a lot of nuanced perspectives and opinions in regards to the abortion issue, and it's not going to be just a simple matter of one size fits all, right? So that's the beautiful thing, and I'm really looking forward to having that conversation. So that's it, folks. I'm going to tie it up there now. You have yourself a great rest of the day and enjoy the rest of the week, and I'll see you in the next stream. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.